person in my surrounding. Okay, I love you.
You are Singapore living in, and it's hard to compete with the authentic Japanese who were born into the system of preciseness. Boy, are they keen on preciseness, and I love them for it. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. There's a whole bunch of people are sending in some unusually good tweets today, by the way. So we will get to those. Everyone knows those. That's the real juicy, exciting stuff. But let's before we get into those, let's get into the big headlines that everyone's talking about on Twitter, shall we? And a very happy Thursday, September 9th to you, wherever you happen to be. And let's just take one more quick little look, see if any of our regular friends, have their hands up, like Ame. And somebody named Nima, a dentist from the Ukraine, has his hand up. Let's see what Nima's all about, shall we? What?
Welcome,
yes, Nima. What's going on? A Persian dentist living in the Ukraine. That sounds like our kind of people. So, and they got Ken hiding in the audience, and got Pierre down there hiding in the audience. Okay, here we go. Biggest news item right now is that Twitter says it's testing communities. Yes, I saw this last night from Jane from Hong Kong. As usual, was breaking news shortly after we concluded our last meeting 12 hours ago. Jane from Hong Kong, who normally joins us in here, found out that Twitter is doing this new thing called communities. And it's essentially Clubhouse clubs, but on Twitter. And so let's go ahead and read their own description of it. It says, Twitter is a useful place for following breaking news and keeping up with what the people you're already interested in are doing, but its relative dearth of discovery features and lack of organized community space make it pretty hard to connect with anyone you aren't actively seeking out. Now, keep in mind Facebook groups also and Clubhouse clubs as a context for this. It says the company is thinking about changing that. Twitter is on a tear with new features lately, and its latest experiment called Communities is designed to make it easier to connect around shared interests. Users will be able to join these new social hubs and tweet directly to other people with shared interests rather than their regular groups of followers. Those tweets will still be public, but replies will be limited to other community members. Communities will be user-generated, though, and Twitter says that it will be limited for now, so most people will have to wait a few months before starting their own groups. The earliest communities will center around popular and generally benign topics on Twitter, such as dogs, weather, sneakers, skincare, and astrology. Twitter's example images also include cryptocurrency plants and black women photographers. The test begins Wednesday, which was yesterday, and will show up in a dedicated spot at the bottom of the iOS app or in the side menu on Twitter.com. Twitter says that Android users will be able to read community tweets too, though more functionality is on the way, presumably in a dedicated app tab, and the ability to join and participate in new groups. Communities will be created and maintained by designated moderators, like Clubhouse, I told you, who will have the ability to invite other users to the group via DM and remove content posted within the group. Very similar to Facebook groups. Initially, invites will be the only way into the community, but it sounds like Twitter has some grand plans for discovery features that makes it easier for people to find places they might want to hang out. Some conversations aren't for everyone, just the people who want to talk about the thing you want to talk about, says Twitter. Right? Wrote in a blog post announcing the feature. We want to continue to support public conversation and help people find communities that match their interests while also creating a more intimate space for conversations. And the article goes on. And it's one of these things that's just far easier to understand when you actually have a little looky look at it. And you can have a looky look at it at the tweet I'm twatting on Twitter right now to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. and you'll write in the tweet itself, you'll see an image of this. And if you click on that image, you'll see a blog post with a cute little video. Every community can set their own rules, just like Clubhouse. You have to agree to those rules, just like Clubhouse. And then you can be part of that, what Twitter's calling communities. And there is a Twitter account now called Communities, and which they just gave themselves. They took it from somebody who wasn't using it, and when you follow the community Twitter account, you can get updated as they continue to break news on these issues. So yeah, you join a Twitter community, just like you follow somebody on Twitter. Now you can follow a community and join that community, and then the moderators might allow you to create tweets in that community that the rest of the community members can see.
You know what's really interesting about that? I mean, first, I think that's one of the things that makes Clubhouse special is that, there are these organic communities. But then as I think about the communities that have organically kind of come together on Twitter, so Black Twitter or K-pop Twitter, right? It's not been a formalized movement, but there's definitely, you can feel when that force is in action, because you just see the trends and you just see the memes and you see everything that's following. So I wonder how something like Black Twitter or like K-pop Twitter, or, I'm sure that there are other really strong informal communities that already exist. I wonder how they will fit into this new model, and whether Twitter will reach out to maybe some of those strong influencers who are already in those communities and, formalize them.
Anyone else with thoughts on communities? Kay Vaughn, who's one of the product managers at Twitter, took to Twitter to say, today we're rolling out our first public testing of communities, which gives people a place to have more focused conversations with people who share the same interests. Communities introduces two very key mechanics I think are worth touching on. And so I'm retweeting out his tweet. My God, my voice is disappearing already. Yeah, I'm drinking water now. So he says that.
Tyler, can I
Yeah,
put
go ahead.
my two
Yeah.
cents on this Twitter? I think we've kind of been mentioning it and seeing that Jack's trying to leave his legacy, censorship, Section 230, publishing, etc. I think with this communities, it also enables multiple paid tiers, and you can actually choose to accept Bitcoin or cash or whatever in those as well. So I think this is also going to be a way to selectively decide who's going to get to hear your voice or interact with you, and while still maintaining a private Twitter. This is how you describe it, is that porn is on Twitter. It's just you don't see it, right? You have to be looking for it, right? And this creates this new layer that is going to enable multiple tiers, and I think some of them paid, some of them unpaid. And I think there's going to also be unique dynamic pricing. And some of these things I talk about aren't going to happen right away, but I kind of see where it's going, because ultimately there's going to be almost like this tug of war, right? You want to either listen to someone or shut someone up. And the pricing is going to change that. There's going to be like this dynamic pricing. So
I'm wondering, I think part of the reason people still use Facebook is because of the community's features in Facebook. I think more than using it on their own personal wall. Some of the communities they built on Facebook don't exist in the other social apps. Like TikTok isn't doing communities. Instagram isn't doing communities.
Instagram though, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump on you here. I didn't understand Instagram until I joined it and realized that the spectrum of my friendships there were related to my interests instead of the people I knew. So as a engineer, as a machinist, a hobbyist, whatever it was, your that was your community. Like in for my case, I did do product design. So some of it was hard goods, like mail, like I hate to use the word mail, but like tactical knives and like man jewelry. I'll reserve my words, like tactical gear, keychains and that kind of stuff. And that community was selling on Instagram since day one, but it just took another layer, like Big Cartel or something like that, And so I think Instagram is that interest-based system that Facebook didn't have, and that's what Facebook saw in Instagram that
So
wasn't there on Facebook.
I normally get approved to test out new Twitter features, as some of you know, and so I've had a little chat with them about being one of the first communities on Twitter for tech news around the world, so that we could have everybody would be able to share the headlines that they find to the community. Then people could follow the community rather than the Tech News Twitter account. They can be part of the community, and basically we can decide who's allowed to share headlines. And it's basically to be considered, you would share headlines as people already do today, and then of course you can join the community, and then you could be approved to be somebody who can share headlines inside of the community. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
lends
but what
credibility, right? Like, because right
what I
now,
love about it is
everybody.
then everyone would see what I see every day, which is this endless flow of headlines, of tweets, that you can see now if you go to the Twitter search box and type in the at TNATW, and you see all the tweets that are tweeting to the at account. But the beautiful part is it would remove many of the duplicates, because everyone would be in the community. We'd all see all the cool headlines that people are sending in. I think it would be a really cool experience. So I mentioned to Twitter, we have 55,000 members here in Clubhouse. And I think it would be a really cool feature, because we're using Twitter in this kind of way, yeah. I mean, we're kind of this fits really nicely with what we're trying to do in terms of sharing tweets, using the tweets as news and that kind of thing. So,
have you feedback to them to allow more than 10?
They now have 13. Yeah. Yes.
13.
Yeah.
What an accomplishment.
How's the response time? Because that's really the magic of
It's
app.
It's still going to be very slow, but they have this. They made a development product decision, that they're optimizing for endless audience sizes rather than low latency. They have it is what it is.
It's akin to like an old ISDN radio show, because most of the radio shows are done via dial-up modems back in the day, or DSL modems before they were called DSL, right? Like Kevin and Bean in LA was done. Kevin lived up in Seattle or something like that, right? So
So Kayvon from Twitter himself says the two interesting aspects of Twitter communities is that tweets you post in communities are narrow casted to only people in that community, and that communities have moderators, and these mods determine what the rules and social norms are within that community. Again, very clubhousey. So that's Twitter communities coming soon near you, hopefully with Tech News Around the World. And by the way, so the Tech News Around the World Twitter account, which hopefully everybody's following, and then people who tweet good headlines regularly, we follow them back. And so now the Tech News Twitter account currently is following about 178 people. And we, like I said, those are exclusively people who are sending in good tweets, because, we want to recognize that, you're somebody who sends in good tweets. So, although that doesn't mean much that we're following you, I mean, except that we make sure we see your tweets. But in the community sense, the 5,220 followers of the Tech News Twitter account, those would be community members who get to follow everything that's happening, but they would be seeing all of the tweets of the 178 people that we are following. So those 178 people who would normally send in links, we would all be seeing all of the links they're sending in all the time. And I think you would love it the same way I love it. It's totally changed the way I use Twitter. I wake up and I see just an incredible flow of awesome headlines, and then I cherry pick out my favorite ones, and we talk about them here on stage. Anyway, so that's the top story of the moment. So the next, I just want to see if there's I see other interesting people tweeting about it on Twitter. Everyone knows there's never attention in small communities. Just people making jokes about. Ryan Hoover says, I'm curious to see how this is adopted. What community would you join? And John Battelle, who's an old school geek, a real pioneer in podcasting, by the way, says Twitter launches communities, checks date 15 years in. Oh, well, 35 years after the well proved the value of real communities. And he's an old school. Oh, Jeremiah, our friend who normally joins us here on stage, also tweeted saying, I think this will be interesting, if not fun. Twitter communities. P.S. There will be a mad rush for people to create communities and get people to join for the clout. And indeed, and the naming of those communities. I wonder how Twitter is going to deal with that. Like whoever gets the cats community first. So anyway, the second biggest article of the moment. A bunch of people tweeted this in. I noticed already, but this is a hot one. The Guardian and many other people covering it. The Guardian says they have documents that the Los Angeles Police Department directs its officers to collect social media information on every citizen they interview, including those not arrested or accused of any crimes. An internal police chief memo shows that employees were directed to use field interview cards, which would then be reviewed. And I'm going to tweet this out now so you can save it and mark it and do whatever stuff you do with these tweets. And the article says the LAPD has directed its officers copies of the field interview cards that police complete when they question civilians reveal that LAPD officers are instructed to record a civilian's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social media accounts alongside basic biographical information. An internal memo further shows that the police chief, Michael Moore, told employees that it was critical to collect the data for use in investigations, arrests, and prosecutions, and warned that supervisors would review cards to ensure they were complete. The documents, which were obtained by the not-for-profit organization, the Brennan Center for Justice, has raised concerns about civil liberties and the potential for mass surveillance of citizens without justification. The real dangers about police having all this social media identifying information at their fingertips. There are real dangers about police having this, says Rachel Levinson Waldman, a deputy director at the Brennan Center, noting that the information was probably stored in a database that could be used for a wide range of purposes. Gee, you think? The Brennan Center conducted a review of 40 other police agencies in the U.S. and was unable to find another department that required social media collection on interview cards, although many have not publicly disclosed copies of their cards. The organization also obtained records about the LAPD's social media surveillance technologies, which have raised questions about the monitoring of activist groups, including Black Lives Matter. In 2015, the LAPD added social media accounts as a line on the physical field interview cards, according to newly unearthed memo from the previous LAPD chief, Charlie Beck. Similar to a nickname or an alias, a person's online persona or identity used for social media can be highly beneficial to investigations. Yep, absolutely. While the social, one last paragraph here. It says, while the social media collection has gone largely unnoticed, the LAPD's use of field interview cards has prompted controversy. Last October, prosecutors filed criminal charges against 3 officers in the LAPD's Metro Division, accusing them of using the cards to falsely label civilians as gang members after stopping them. That unit also has a history of stopping black drivers at disproportionately high rates and, according to the LA Times, has more frequently filled out cards for Black and Latino residents they stopped. Meanwhile, more than half of the civilians stopped by Metro officers and documented in the cards were not arrested or cited. The fact that the department, under scrutiny for racial profiling, was also engaging in broad-scale social media account collection is troubling, said Levinson Waldman. Go ahead.
Nothing. I was just going to say that QN second profiles for everyone. Just start making For every comment you've made on social media, I think your alter ego should have a new profile that can counter it and kind of confuse the situation a bit. I'm just being
Yeah,
jovial here.
she fears it's part of a mass surveillance operation, monitoring by. It's such a interesting topic. I mean, I wonder what happens if you give them false information, or if you just say, "I don't have a social media account,"
Or I just changed my opinion since then.
or if you actually don't have social media account. If I don't have a TikTok account, for example, so what happens then? And what if you have multiple Instagram accounts and you give, an account that is totally useless versus, a very personal one? And what if your personal one accounts are all private?
You're giving it away, Tyler. This was the dilemma we had when we were kids. You get busted, and it's like, I'm gonna call your parents, and you're like, haha, I have my own line.
So, yes.
Tyler,
Thank you.
check the hand raise, please.
Okay.
And Charles is here.
Two good voices on this one. So for Johan and Charles and anyone else who just might be joining, the second biggest story of the day is the revelation from The Guardian that the LAPD directs its officers to collect social media information on every civilian they interview. By the way, so does the Thailand immigration for everyone entering Thailand. They ask you for your social media accounts. Yes, really? And I wonder how long before America might start doing the same.
It does
They don't.
happen. I mean, not in a blanket way, but when I was a university administrator in the U.S., I had international students who were on their way to campus, and then they had to go back home because their social media accounts had been checked. So it's not universally applied, but it happens. I don't know what their system is in the U.S.
I'm
It
only happy to share my Instagram account if they will follow me. Because if my followers account doesn't go up, I'm not.
Yeah, you have to follow me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
follow for follow.
I think America requires for ESTA, right, for non-residents, and I had to when I apply for the ESTA, I had to give all my SNS accounts actually. So America is asking all non-residents to give the all social media.
So wait. So America asked for your social media accounts when?
A couple of years ago, before
On what? On what were you applying for?
Just
for a visa.
My friends. Yeah, for ESTA. Because without having ESTA, ESTA, I would have the issue to enter America anyway, so that I have to apply prior to entering the US. And for the application, I had.
Is it like a tourist visa?
No, it's actually for people from countries with visa-free arrangements. So we have to go online to apply for this thing called ESTA. I think it will last for 3 years for every application. It's actually pretty straightforward. I didn't remember that I have to put down any social media account.
I got it. I'm looking at it right here. One sec. I'll hand it to you next, Charles. The ESTA is the official ESTA application, the Electronic System for Travel Authorization. And so if you want to enter America, they ask, it's basically who should apply. You are a citizen of a visa waiver program country. You are currently not in possession of a visitor's visa. Your travel is for 90 days or less. You plan to travel to the United States for business or play. It's like their online visa application process. And they do a background check on you if you want a tourist visa, basically. Yeah.
It started after 9/11.
Charles.
Yeah.
Tyler, did you see the article? I don't have it, but I remember reading it a bit ago, saying that for people can possibly get their citizenship revoked if they start seeing a lot of negative stuff on their
from which country?
Media.
What?
US.
No.
The US.
Yes. Yes,
That's
I saw that.
tricky because the U.S. wants to tax its
Wait, wait, wait,
citizens
wait, wait.
while
Hang on, hang on,
denying
hang on, hang on,
tax
hang on. Wait,
on
hang on a second. You send me this link. You're claiming that the article suggests that an American citizen who speaks too negatively about America could have their citizenship revoked?
I did. I saw that. I'm going
That's
to try
just,
and search
that's
and see if I
simply
can find
cannot
it.
be the case.
Oh, Tyler.
Yes.
Oh, Tyler. Not
it.
just China.
It's in the U.S.'s best interest to let
Uh,
Americans keep their
correct.
citizenship.
By the way,
Is what I'm getting at.
it
Unless
is
there's some sort of
incredibly difficult to
to
if you
revoke. Yeah.
wanted to revoke your American status, it would be incredibly difficult and expensive to do so.
No, Tyler, this is for individuals who became American citizens and may have committed fraud when they were applying during the citizenship process. So increasingly we use social media and that sort of stuff to get a real picture of the applicant for citizenship. And just to be clear on this, the social media standards went into effect, I think, in 2015, if I recall correctly. It's now been a few years since my cousin actually worked on some of those regulations, interestingly enough. But yeah, so what's happening now is actually what if you come to the country, to the U.S. or to any Five Eyes country, and you have your normal cell phone, they'll ask you for your number, or basically, if you're from a problematic country or you have a SIM from a weird country, we will just how to put this? We'll basically break into your phone and get all that social media stuff anyway. So increasingly, facial rec is being deployed because obviously, if you have a picture of somebody, you know, you could pull up their socials if you had, say, something like, I don't know, Clearview. So that's something that's being deployed as well. So just sort of something to consider.
Charles, I have a question to you about that. Do you know if you're at immigration and they ask you for your telephone, if, for example, let's say it's an iPhone and you press the reset button and erase all the info, is that enough to, properly erase the telephone?
So usually when you land, if you're a target, they've already got everything off your phone. That's usually how it goes. So even before you get to customs.
Can I
Yes.
add
Welcome,
into
Ted.
that?
What's up?
Hey, so if you're just landed and they catch you, this is due to Apple. This is due to the bombing, the suicide bomber case that happened. I think somewhere in the states, one of the states. In
911.
was it 911? Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. I think yeah. And he refused to give up the phone. And Apple is one of the few companies that doesn't. They can do it, but refuse to do it until now.
No,
And
that's
it
not
was
that. No. Apple claims that they can't do it. They actually outsource it to an Australian company that's Five Eyes compliant. And
yeah, but
increasingly, what typically will happen is DHS will have an order for you. So if you're on a plane, and remember they have all the passenger manifests feeding into a central repository. So if you're flagged on that, and they know, say like, hey, Tyler's coming in from Thailand and landing
Uh
at
oh.
LAX, what they'll do is they'll scan his phone before he'll even clear customs. That's typically how it works. Apple, like the Apple privacy thing, is really Apple makes this argument because it wants to destroy Facebook. And if you look up kind of the history of fights between Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg, there's always this claim of Tim Cook being like, "Oh, we're for privacy." Privacy is a branding exercise for Apple. Like, I assure you, there's no there. I mean, like, it's extremely easy to get into any cell phone technology. It's just like they don't allow them to be sold if they can't be broken into by multiple countries. And the US is extremely good at it these days.
question: if you're still in international airspace, isn't that illegal and against privacy?
As far as I know, they can't do it while you're on the plane in terms of like in airspace, but they know, like, when you go and you apply to fly into the United States, say, I don't know how it works in other countries, but I do know it works mostly this way in the Five Eyes countries. And you go and you submit your passport, or you fill out your application. You're booking your flights or whatever. That goes into a repository, like that's kind of like the no-fly list, and through that repository, they will check to see if you're a person of interest and if they need to, have the FBI or DHS or whatever waiting for you on the other end of that flight. That's how they catch people. I mean, that's kind of how it works. So.
Because having worked in the airport, I know that it's international airspace on the air side of the airport, which means they can stop you because you fill out the form, and that's they could hold you for false information, pull you in through the custom line. Then it would be on the national side, and then they can hold you for whatever reason they want. I think that's what it is. Smart move. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, so
Charles, you know that the thing that I sent you yesterday is a map of how you're connected on all social media. You don't even
Oh,
need to
Johan,
provide it
I love
anymore.
I love what you sent me. I'm having it checked right now to see whether or not I can legally invest in it, given that you're Swedish and all that. So don't worry, I haven't forgot about you. It's what you sent me was a work of art. It's good work.
Yeah, I sent you level 0 to level 1 of the information that we actually use. So much of that we discuss here right now is things that you don't even need to provide it anymore. The thing is that Clubhouse is one of the ways that we actually can link an identity to their LinkedIn, to their to the Twitter and the Instagram account, and this
Yeah,
is just the
I think
beginning.
maybe not wise to discuss your work on Clubhouse. Given its sensitivity.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is just data for me.
okay.
You
So the
wonder.
next big article, we covered just the first two. Number 3 is from Wired, that an investigation reveals how social media influencers in Kenya are hired to spread disinformation on Twitter against Kenyan journalists, judges, and activists. It's a lucrative gig for content creators who make $10 to $15 a day by smearing journalists and activists on social media in Kenya. On May 18th of this year, the insidious hashtag anarchist judges appeared on Kenyan Twitter timelines, apparently driven by a number of faceless bots and retweeted by a series of sock puppet accounts. The deluge of tweets cast suspicion on both the competence and integrity of the senior High Court of Kenya judges that had just shot down the controversial Amendments Bill of 2021. Many falsely claimed the judges were involved in narcotics dealing, bribery, and political partisanship. It quickly became one of the country's top trending topics. Such malicious, coordinated disinformation attacks are rapidly growing in Kenya. My Mozilla Foundation colleague Brian Obilo and I have found in an investigation. Through a series of interviews with influencers involved in these campaigns, we reviewed evidence of a booming shadowy industry of social media influencers for hire in Kenya. Members of civil society and journalists alike have increasingly come under disinformation attacks that seeks to silence them, muddy their reputations, and stifle their speech. Twitter, which strongly influences the country's news cycle, has exploitable features like its trending algorithm, has been central to these operations. Many of the accounts of individuals involved promote causes and political ideologies without disclosing that they are part of a paid campaign. Even some verified accounts are complicit. With the aid of Twint, Sprinkler, and Trendanalia, we trailed 2 months of data from May 1st to June 30th of disinformation attacks by mapping and analyzing specific hashtags that the perpetrators used on Twitter. In particular, we focused on Kenya's constitutional amendment bill, famously known as the Buildings Bridges Initiative, BBI, debates over which were roiling at the time. The criteria involved mapping certain accounts that posted malicious content targeted at Kenyan activists and judicial officers. Timestamps within the metadata of these tweets suggested strong synchronization. Sharp bursts of activity in very short periods of time. In total, we flagged 23,606 tweets and retweets released by 3,742 accounts under their 11 hashtags. The campaigns we took an interest in directly attacked citizens and prominent civil society activists who were vocally opposed to it. They also sought to discredit civil society organizations and activists by portraying them as villains who were being funded by Kenya's deputy president, William Ruto, who had been vocally against. The well-coordinated attacks are directed through WhatsApp groups to avoid detection. In groups whose conversations were shared with us, administrators gave instructions about what to post, the hashtags to use, which tweets to engage with, who to target, and how to synchronize posts so that they trend. The main goal is to get trending on Twitter, said one influencer who requested to remain anonymous for fear of retribution. I'm not sure what our jobs would look like without that target. There is money to be made. Our sources said they get paid between $10 and $15 to participate in 3 campaigns per day. Others are on a retainer that can go as high as $250 a month in a country where many citizens earn $100 a day. The 3 most frequent types of victims of these campaigns, our analysis found, were Kenyan journalists, judges, and activists. Many of the attacks against Jerotish Say, a prominent member of the anti-BBB Linda Katiba campaign, for example, used her and her father's likenesses, pretended to be them, and alleged that her efforts were being funded by William Ruto. In response to our investigation, Twitter removed over 100 accounts in Kenya that had violated its platform manipulation policies. The Kenyan High Court struck down the BBI on May 14, and the Court of Appeals. Since the upheld ruling, these attacks have notably changed in their visual style. They've increasingly employed a look of a newspaper editorial, cartoon characters, and memes preferred by American right-wing Twitter. Based on the data we gathered from the Twitter trend aggregator, 8 of the 11 hashtags we identified gained enough amplification to become trending topics in Twitter. The demand for the service by the political class in Kenya is strong. Curiously, there was little evidence that such operations actually sway people's opinions. The problems aren't unique to Kenya. Throughout Africa, most recently during Uganda's election earlier this year, political actors are exploiting Twitter's features like trends, its engagement mechanics, and account creation to try and control political narratives. For one thing, Twitter's moderation team could pay much closer attention to its trending section. The social media activist organization Sleeping Giants has repeatedly called for Twitter to untrend itself, either by removing the trends altogether or by disabling them during critical times such as elections. As Kenya heads towards a contentious election in 2022, the demand for these services will continue. Several political parties and officials will seek out inauthentic coordination campaigns. The question is who's paying, where's the money coming from, and who is incentivized to weaponize social media in Africa. And this article is coming from Wired. So sending that out to you.
Hey Tyler, you know how like there's like rogue geoengineers and they say like the UN's like saying no, don't fire it in the ocean because anyone can do that with $1,000. You can cause algae blooms and it's like incredible the amount of like change to the biosphere and stuff. I almost wonder if there's like a digital ecosystem equivalent where it's like if you sprinkle like feed to the trolls, like it just like ends up causing this toxic algae bloom at scale. It's like rogue geoengineering. It's like rogue social engineering at scale. Anyone can sponsor it. It's so cheap to do so these days.
And
Hey
I
Tyler,
think
sorry, real quick, we have
Okay,
Aaron
thank
and
you.
Michelle in the audience.
to what you've just shared, Tyler, I'm thinking back in recent years. I want to say it was like maybe 4 years or so ago when Kenya had, national election, and it actually became quite violent. And so I think, just the local context, within the country probably inspires people to use any means necessary to garner their votes, right? I mean, so we see it in countries that fortunately have been relatively less violent, but particularly when the stakes are, so high and the tensions are just so extreme, it doesn't surprise me that people are turning to social media in order to try to garner the votes that they need and manipulate.
This doesn't.
Yeah.
I should say this doesn't just happen in Africa. Happens around the world, and it's something that is often used by intelligence agencies to sort of flood the zone, because that which trends on Twitter or social media ends up being in the sort of newspapers or on television. And so there's a sort of concerted effort in many cases using bots, of course, but also human beings to do this sort of thing. And it usually depends. I mean, Kenya, Uganda, a few others sort of belong to sort of the Anglosphere in a lot of ways. So it's probably a country trying to upset that relationship.
I think I cleverly worded. Um, yeah. And there and
And it has nothing to do with the recent change of governance in three other countries in Africa that are also rich in resources. Just think about.
There's an interesting page on an article was written a few years ago called "How Much of the Internet Is Fake," and essentially it was written in a New York Mag with things, and it's an in-depth article. It's extremely well researched, and they talk to a lot of the people involved essentially at the social media companies, and the basic assertion of the article is that we're about to cross. This is back in 2018, 2019. They're saying we're about to cross the point where essentially that more than 50% of each one of these platforms is going to basically be not by human traffic but bot traffic for any of the page views, essentially likes or subscribes or essentially retweets or etc. The majority of the coverage is not actually there, and there's a strange basically inversion that happens, and we've crossed that threshold on a lot of these things where the majority of the platforms we actually build are not actually made for human beings but for basically serving bots and algorithms. And this basically, as that trend accelerates, it ends up resulting in a very, very strange thing. There is a new conspiracy theories going around. This is hilarious. They write about in the Atlantic this week. That essentially that the internet, there's a conspiracy theory. It's a new one, the hottest one off of the meme street or whatever. And the idea is that the internet actually died back in 2016, and that since then everyone that you've ever talked to on the internet is just an algorithm that's just making it all up. And so the idea is the internet isn't actually real anymore. It's just a fake government conspiracy for corporations to sell people things. And it's like the hilarious part is everyone's replying tongue in cheek to the whole thing, and it's quite entertaining because the internet is dead theory is a very interesting one. But
but
anyways,
to
just fun
Charles's
things.
point,
Let's say
there there you there
let's
there
say
used to be
hypothetically,
but there used to be
hypothet-
this used to be going back a couple not that long ago. Twitter used to highlight. There used to be headlines 2 years ago. Twitter's security privacy team would come out and say, deal with all of these bot accounts, waves and waves of bot accounts, large waves of bot accounts, thousands of bots, 100,000 bots, fake accounts that were trying to do misinformation campaigns. And Twitter says they're coming from Russia and China consistently. And now Twitter's done quite a good job at stopping those bot armies. Over time, they've kind of figured out how to reduce and remove them and spot them and whatever. And so now that there's a new strategy of paying actual humans with actual accounts that really can't be defeated but can be paid financially to basically send the message that the bots used to send in a much more effective way, are we not to assume that it's likely Russia or China who's driving these? And interesting coincidence how much financial interest China has in Africa at the moment, especially in the countries where they are friendly with the regimes to do a resource extraction. They have an economic, motive to have particular parties in place that are friendly to Beijing, and remove political parties who aren't friendly to Beijing in Africa.
let's just say hypothetically speaking that you are an influencer on a major platform, and you have tens of thousands of followers, and you have trust, you relationship with your audience. I mean, sometimes you're even on other larger, more established media places. And let's say for the price of, I don't know, $1,000 a month, I can basically get you to say things that I think are useful. Now, they might even be on brand. You might say that that's influencer marketing, but it might be influence of a different kind if you catch my drift. And I would just say, you're kidding yourself if you don't think that this happens. And hypothetically speaking, there are many such instances of this on pretty much every platform you can identify, and it's an issue, particularly when things like crypto and other forms are used for communication. But it's an extreme phenomenon that takes place on many different
But
levels, and you would be surprised. Sometimes the most, like as an example, a friend of mine was working in Iran, and his job was to go and find the voices online that were the most anti-American out there, and his job was to go and bribe those people to have a relationship with them, because if he could basically talk to the most anti-American people there, he could map out their networks, he could really subvert them in a lot of ways. And back in the day, the Italian Communist Party was almost entirely funded by the CIA, including with the CIA actually paying for and even publishing in Virginia their actual newspaper. So just something to think about: the old techniques updated for modern age.
okay, so next big headline, or someone want to comment? Was that messy? No.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that those things really happened. In the 2010 Arab Springs, we've seen how people organized themselves. Even they had famous people being part of the organization on the Facebook, and how they brought down Hosni Mubarak. So it does happen, and it has already happened. And I think the problem also all over Africa and also everywhere else is social media is a two-edged sword. It does help in some instance, and in another, it does make things worse. So I wonder how it could be used for good. Sometimes, like I have been saying, here in Ethiopia, for example, the society is so much in so many tribes and ethnicities, a lot of it. And there are so many false information that gets amplified, and then things get worse. And especially now, the problem we have in the north, things get exasperated by social media. But sometimes also, when elections happen, some politician can use it for good. Even opposition politicians use it for good, but also they get shut down because of the social media as well. So I wonder how we can make these things for better.
Well, you'll
That's all I want to
notice.
add.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
you'll notice that Uganda shut down social media right before its election, right? And I think increasingly you're going to see countries that are third world countries shut down social media entirely ahead of major elections in their countries. And I initially thought I wouldn't be one of those people that would support that, but I've kind of come around to supporting that, because I think when passions are intense and you have a real fledgling democracy or a fledgling society, you sort of have to do that. But as Messi knows, no one would ever support or condemn a dam in Ethiopia on the board, based upon being paid money by foreign countries, would they, Messi? That would never happen in Ethiopia.
I hope not. I absolutely hope not, because just right now, it really, really, wow. It's I never thought that I would be back in Ethiopia and be in this situation. What's happening in the north and what's going on is really, really difficult, and I'm hoping that there will be a good resolution. But when things are really hot based on especially ethnicity, it just is not good at all. So I just worry about social media sometimes amplifying these social divisions and ethnicities and things like that. And to add into what Charles said, here in Ethiopia, even a few years back, when we have national exams, the government just shut down the internet for a week because they just don't want people to pass results and things like that, and cheat with each other using the internet. So sometimes when you have a monopoly, it's easier to shut it down. But with the new government, where and Safaricom coming in, that's gonna change. I'm sorry, I got a call. But anyway, yeah, it does happen shutdowns. And like you say, Charles, sometimes you do come around and try to support the shutdowns because you want to cool things down and instead of getting it worse. But sometimes also as a business and private sector person, you try to find a better way to solve the problems, because the productivity shutting down the internet for a week is huge, huge. So yep, it's a two-edged sword, like I said. It is an iffy situation to be in.
Okay.
So yeah.
Next headline is about VentureBeat and many others. Google made an announcement basically about something they call their workspace is basically Google's version of Office, where you've got your email, your documents. Microsoft Office was spreadsheets and Microsoft Word and email, Outlook, and now Google's bundling it in a similar way, bundling Gmail and Google Sheets and Google Docs and the cloud.
They've been repackaging the same thing
Yes.
for near 15 years. It's getting a little absurd. They bought Zoho, they threw a layer on top with user account management, rebranded it to corporate, and they basically have sat on it. And occasionally when a manager wants to prove something, they throw on the UX team to basically rebrand and move a button around. And then they basically resell it again. It's amazing how long they've gone.
So the new element is they announce workspace updates, including spaces for collaboration and meet. They call it meet calling with Gmail. So now you can have your calls inside of Gmail, and hardware, including a 27-inch and a 65-inch video calling devices by Logitech to do video stream calling through Google Meet through these actual, hardware monitors.
They're literally going to clone Microsoft for this. Like, they're literally cloning
Yeah,
their
a new
here.
Event is Google today announced a series of updates across Workspace with these big screens with the video cameras that are optimized for enabling calls over the internet and over the interwebs. So the next big one is about Tim Berners-Lee, who is considered one of the pioneers in enabling the World Wide Web, and he is joining Proton's board. And those who joined us yesterday will recall that the biggest headline yesterday was about a company called Proton, based in Switzerland, which provided the IP addresses of some what do we call these, green squatters in France, who are environmental activists who are squatting in buildings in Paris. And the French authorities don't like that, and so they reached out to Switzerland to force Proton, this email company which brands itself as...
That's one hell of a favor to call in.
So, because they want to get these activists, they want to stop this whole squatting going on in Paris. Anyway, the Proton is an alternative email service which brands itself as being privacy friendly. That it's, it's secret email. So don't use big tech. If you want to keep your identity and your privacy a priority, use Proton. That's how they branded themselves. And they even said on their website that they don't reveal IP addresses. And they've, in the past 24 hours, have now removed that because it's now been revealed that they do, under certain circumstances, will reveal the IP addresses of the behind these email accounts, which they did give to Switzerland, which Switzerland then provided to France, which then used against these green environmental activist squatters. So Tim Berners-Lee is now joining the board of Proton in an advisory role amid privacy backlash at Proton Mail, which disclosed its activist IP addresses to Swiss authorities. That's the headline. And he says, I'm a firm supporter of privacy. So what an interesting time for this to go down. No doubt they were planning this. And what a interesting coincidence that it's happening now. And they have to do a bit of damage control. And they've lost Proton certainly in a tight spot at the moment. Yeah, Chris.
If there's anything that I hope dies from this, is essentially the phrase, essentially, if you're not paying for it, you're the product. The idea being that there's a free version of everything and there's a paid version. And if you pay for it, then essentially that you're going to be treated differently. As we talk on our $1,000 Apple devices with essentially like a Proton Mail subscription, I think it wasn't that bad, but you get like 40, $50 of things off of the premium things with stuff. You can basically have all these services you pay all sorts of stuff for, but de facto, some of them are protected, but once you basically, that was only the somewhat premium tier. They have the other premium tier where you basically use the VPNs. You can use your own VPN, you can use your own unrouting. They'll sell you other versions that basically work with it. And you can use roll your own solution. But I'm just articulating that this idea that if you pay for it, you're going to have protection. I don't think that is essentially as a shutdown for saying these systems essentially are designed differently. I think the entire architecture essentially is following these types of ideas.
What an interesting man, Tim Berners, of the World Health Organization. Goodness, what an interesting British, subject who has no intelligence size for dealing with Proton in Switzerland.
But he had sold an NFT recently.
Okay, so the next big one is that Microsoft says it has now fixed a flaw that could have allowed hackers to access data of some Azure customers, which is their cloud. Palo Alto Networks reported the flaw in July. Microsoft warned some of its Azure cloud computing customers that a flaw discovered by security researchers, namely Palo Alto Networks, could have allowed hackers to access their data. And this is just your daily reminder that Microsoft is Swiss cheese. Yet again, I don't think has there been a day in the past month where we haven't had a headline about Microsoft vulnerability?
And what a coincidence. They seem to be losing all these contracts in the federal government of the United States. Huh. I wonder if these two things are related, Tyler.
The next one.
I'm starting to wonder if our headlines are being funked with.
Or maybe, just maybe, like, stop me if you've heard this one before. Maybe Microsoft, which has a founder named Bill Gates, Microsoft, whose founder, Bill Gates, has this relationship with this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, which leads to his divorce. Maybe all these holes in Microsoft software are actually not mistakes, but actually doorways. Just a thought, something to think about.
Doorways to a whole new world.
So, Jay, I just invited you up, but it looks like you might need to jump out and back in. And okay, the next big one is the carryover from our last meeting. Coinbase says that the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, threatened to sue over its yet-to-be-launched Lend program following discussions with the regulator SEC that have lasted almost 6 months. Any clarity that anybody's had since we met 12 hours ago? I don't think there's any...
Divine insight, get glimpses of the beyond, the third eye is open, anything to share? Because these are really useful if we could do the tech stuff in the future.
Yeah, for those who missed it, just the very quick and fast, dirty summary is that Coinbase is one of the largest crypto exchanges. They also have a way for, like many exchanges, like Robinhood and whatnot, you can keep your money inside of Coinbase and to trade with, and the money that you keep in the form of the U.S. Stable coins, they will pay you I believe it's 4% interest or something along those lines. They were planning to anyways. They call that Lend. This is very, very common in the crypto space, that the crypto exchanges and wallets will pay you to park your stable coins. And they pay different amounts of interest. And dozens, if not hundreds, of crypto startups do this. Coinbase was planning to do it, and the SEC said, if you do that, we will sue you. And to which Coinbase's CEO says, WTF? We've been reaching out to you to let you know we were planning to do this, and you refused to meet with me when I visited Washington, D.C. to give you the heads up about this. Everyone else is doing it. What's the problem? and why are you only targeting us? And what's going on here? So, we will know more soon. We're expecting updates to this any day now.
If only somebody had been saying in this room that the U.S. government was anti-crypto. I don't know who would be such a person.
Why would they not like their dollar being destabilized? Like, shouldn't this be welcomed with open arms in the spirit of innovation?
I'm just saying, there's some interesting stuff going on here, and I would just say, there were a lot of people that said, "Oh, Coinbase at $100 billion." I think it's now at like 50 billion, and I think it's going to go a lot lower before all things are said and done there. So, I like a lot of the guys who work at Coinbase. I've tried to recruit some of the ones who could actually pass a background check, but my good, you're not going to be able to Uber, out muscle and like flex against the SEC. Like that there are a few government agencies that you just don't fuck with, and that's one of them.
So the next big,
they need to have better lunch meetings.
The next big article is from the Wall Street Journal that researchers say that China, and by the way, it's Google researchers, are saying that China-linked fake social media accounts tried to draw Asian Americans to protest against racism. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter suspended the accounts. So this is China-linked fake social media accounts, yet again, being called out by Google researchers who were active on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Do we imagine they're using TikTok, a Chinese app, which is directly invested by the CCP, who sits as one of the 3 seats on the board of TikTok? Do we imagine they're active on TikTok, or they're using the algorithm of TikTok? They said themselves last week they want to control the algorithms of TikTok in mainland China to reduce toxic content in mainland China. Can we imagine that they might be using those algorithms?
I'm sure,
Tyler,
quick
question.
Tyler, that all those 200,000 plus Chinese donors to all the Proud Boys crowd funds and all of the interesting Chinese donors to all the Black Lives Matter crowd funds, I'm sure that all of that effort, all of those donations were just sincerely felt, and that there was just something stirring, just for a specific period of time, and all those cards seem to, oh wait, they're all prepaid credit cards, that's weird, what a strange thing. And all the Stop Asian Hate gatherings that don't have anything to do with the Communist Party's operations here in the United States, stuff that they were involved in with the oil infrastructure in Houston, that had nothing to do with the Chinese government. And if you think otherwise,
didn't they
you're a
burn all the
conspiracy
documents
theorist.
in there?
Yes.
Didn't they locked themselves in a hole and burned all the documents?
Yes. Well, in fact, they barricaded themselves in there to burn the documents, and called the fire department after it was done. And it was quite the smell when we were driving by there. It was interesting times.
One thing I want to throw out here, Tyler, just something, just for we can get a scope of sense of scale, because I think that's one of the things that's being vastly distorted with our communication platforms. You talked earlier essentially about like, I can find like Amazon has 1 million employees, and so when a journalist basically pulls out like 5 or 10 of them to say I got fired and I don't like the company as a thing. When we're talking about things like, Stop Asian Hate and essentially bot researchers as a thing, I think it'd be really important, essentially, if there's any numbers associated with these things, that we basically be citing those, because while intent is a very valuable thing to basically discern if they link that to central party doctrine, because there's a small number of people that send out these instructions, especially with how centralized China is. But intent as of a value as its own. But it's important to also quantify some of these things, because it's going to become more relevant in coming days, essentially, as we see more and more of these influence campaigns, to say, was that a huge kind of thing, or was it a smaller scale operation? Because I think it's going to be coming up a lot more.
Okay, so it's also, yes, well, this same story is being covered by CNN. Pro-China misinformation operation attempted to exploit U.S. COVID divisions. Oh, let's read that one. The Hill, research finds Chinese influence group trying to mobilize U.S. COVID protests. Engadget, fake pro-China accounts tried to push Americans to attend anti-racism protests. ZDNet, pro-Chinese government propaganda campaign spurs on COVID-19 protests in the U.S. And Reuters, pro-China social media campaign. Yeah, so everyone's covering this. And yesterday, Vice news headline was that the COVID deniers are going viral on TikTok. And their assessment was
Wait! Shutting down one of the world's largest economies for exports, essentially, because essentially they can't basically get people to get their freaking shots. I wonder what essentially this could have any geopolitical.
But Vice concluded that these anti-vaxxers on TikTok were going viral because they had somehow figured out the algorithm. But interestingly, with any small inspection of those viral anti-vaxxers, they all are new accounts with very small followers. So they generally aren't experts on TikTok. Normally, people who go viral on social media platforms have lots of followers and have figured out how the app works. Like Mr. Beast, very notably Mr. Beast on YouTube, really knows how YouTube works. He knows how to make a viral video, and that's why his videos go viral. And he has, no surprise, millions of followers on YouTube. People with
I missed the opening sentence. What was the you said that they have broken or found out how the algorithm on TikTok works?
Vice.com did their big story yesterday was that anti-vaxxers are going viral on TikTok. And then I'm saying Vice concluded that these anti-vaxxers had figured out how to go viral by figuring out the algorithm on TikTok. To which I'm saying, no, that's not what happened, Vice. You're wrong. It's actually more simple than that. That if
there was a ProPublica researcher where they basically looked at the number of content people that create the majority of the most shared articles on Facebook. I think specifically was the one network they're looking at, but they looked at the Twitter infrastructure as well. And essentially they're finding out that essentially it's only like 20 or 30 different people in real life that are basically creating the majority of content that's shared amongst the anti-vaxxers, which is somewhat shockingly small. So this is something that's basically you can map the network of essentially where things are happening. I'm sure, like hell, there's a lot of groups that essentially are very interested in seeing where this is happening because it's having an enormous amount of political influence, despite the fact that essentially the number of people behind it are essentially having very strange motivations.
But the point I'm making is that these anti-vaxxer accounts that are going viral on TikTok notably don't have any followers. So it's very unlikely that they have mastered the algorithm of an app they are brand new to. People who pick up golf clubs and try to go play golf for the first time don't hit holes in one. Normally they hit the ball way off into the fucking weeds.
I don't know about you, Tyler, but whenever I investigate how algorithms work, they're just like they're really well put together people. Now, I will say this though, it does seem interesting that the solution is always to do whatever big pharma says on all of the American platforms, and I don't know. They seem to have been in favor of the opioids. They've seemed to have been in things where they were very, very wrong. So I know Johan and some other folks here are from Sweden. I'm just curious, the Swedish approach seems to have worked, of basically tight immigration, not allowing people into your country without COVID tests, sort of like strategically executing on this. And I'm just curious if Johan has some others. And I don't know if there's anyone from Australia here, but I've heard through the grapevine that the variant that's going around in Australia is in fact a totally different variant altogether. And I'm sure that has nothing to do with the fact that Australia is a very resource rich country south of China.
Anyway,
I must say you have been gaslighted, my friend. Sweden has done absolutely nothing correctly regarding this one.
There's no virus checks of any kind.
We have screwed up this so royally that it's unbelievable.
No. When you go into the country, so like I just had a friend who went to Sweden and they were checked,
they weren't
going in, and they just
that doesn't happen.
No, sorry,
no?
Sir.
Okay,
maybe and it has never ever happened in Sweden. In the major Swedish airports in Gothenburg, Stockholm, and Malmö, we have had the
You have the
possibility
option.
for you to totally
Yeah,
voluntarily
but which no
take a
one will
test.
know. No one will know the result of the test other than you if you voluntarily decide to give yourself a vaccine test, a COVID test, entering the Swedish airports.
What's what's the death
Very
rate in
low.
Sweden though?
It's very low, but we
Hmm.
have 15,000 dead totally. And the thing is that 15,000 for a country of 10 million or less than 10 million is way, way, way higher than our
Correct.
countries
The
around
other
Norway,
Nordic countries have
Sweden,
actually done
Denmark,
far
and
better on that
Finland.
point.
Yeah, the thing is, they have totally, the other countries in the Nordics have 1/5 of the number of dead that Sweden have,
But
with a population that is way more than we have.
that's primarily due to the
Correct.
elderly homes getting.
Yeah, we had an elderly home
To
exposure
some
early
extent.
on, which kind of
We want to make sure that everyone got it equally, except we hyper concentrated it in areas that were kind of
no, it's crazier
not
than
good.
that. It was that
Didn't the Prime Minister of Japan just resign over like 15,000 dead in Japan? Something
that's
crazy like that.
No, there's no 15,000 dead.
I mean, how many dead are there, Cheryl? And why
I
did
don't
he
know.
resign?
That's since the beginning until now. It is not a sudden thing. But to be honest with you, I think Japan did pretty well in terms of COVID control. But I don't think Suga stepped down just because of it's just because of this reason. I think it's just an
there's
excuse.
been
So
16,000
no,
deaths in
yeah.
Japan.
From the
Correct.
beginning, from the beginning until now, means
Yes.
from last year until now. But
Yeah, and
there's
how many live in Japan?
125 million people
125
in
million, yeah.
Japan. So basically, yeah, so basically the COVID case rate is only about around 1%, and the death rate is 1%, around 1% of the case rate. So it's actually not very high. They're doing it quite well. And don't forget, there's no lockdown at all in Japan.
Same with
Ever.
Sweden, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, Johan, I've heard that a lot of the people who've died of COVID in Sweden are not, shall we say, ethnic Swedes. Is this
Yeah,
true, or what's your
yeah,
impression of this?
that's actually true, and that's something they have shared away from talking about. Actually, COVID went like a wildfire through the most troubled areas in Sweden, and they had a very high fertility rate in obese with non-Nordic origin, and that was,
I
and
know where Charles is going
Well,
now.
especially in the
there's
elder care
it's
population.
either
I know where
where do you
Charles is
think he's
going
going,
now.
Cheryl?
It's
It's
all
either
in the
well,
genes. It's all in
it
the
could be even
genes.
simpler than that, which is very dark-skinned people in countries with no sunlight have very low vitamin D, and vitamin D is suspected to be related to your ability to fight off viral things like COVID.
I think it's because Swedish society is so racist to those non-Swedes that they just want to punish them. For
Oh,
that's what it's all
that was an
about, Tyler.
Oh,
interesting take.
Ouch! Ouch!
ouch.
Sweden. Just
Tyler,
We could actually take the thing is that Sweden has not performed so well. I can say that for sure. I'm both a nurse and I've been following
So,
COVID very closely. But we can segue from that to a tweet I actually sent a couple of minutes ago to the TN88W. Apparently, Tyler's friends, let's call the anti-vaxxers that, have been taking ivermectin, which is an anti-worm treatment for horses to be able to fight off COVID without a vaccine. Now it so happened that 85% of the men taking ivermectin as an alternative treatment go sterile. So they have actually cleaned themselves from
wait a
HIVO.
minute. Are you
If
saying
that,
ivermectin is making men go sterile?
yeah, I just sent you the link.
Via what? Oh, to the Twitter account. Hold on. Let's read this one.
We got some friends in the
Hold
audience.
on. How many minutes ago did you send that, Johan?
It's about an hour ago.
Like they say on Reddit, big if COVID.
Where's Johan? I gotta find this. What's the source?
Oh, I
Johan,
don't.
just DM Tyler.
My problem is
Charles, I'm curious. about your solution, Charles.
Hold on here. So, Johan, if you would, while I'm finding this, I don't see it in the last hour. Sorry, so please DM it if you can. The
When I was over
Oh,
in
I
the
got it now.
UK meeting with my
Here we go.
counterparts over there, they showed they showed me the statistics that 3.5 times more British Indians are dying in their sort of COVID units than native Brits. But of course, that's just because Britain is also very racist. It's a very racist place. Um, no, I mean, look, the evidence is pretty clear that COVID affects different people differently. And we need to be sort of thinking about why that is and why it is that people who are obese are dying at a much higher rate. And where is Michelle Obama encouraging us all to let's move? Maybe she's the ultimate racist or the ultimate anti fat person. So just something to
So
think
I
about.
just, Johan, I found this article. The source is KTSM News, which is the local news outlet, NBC News in El Paso, Texas. So the NBC News out of El Paso, Texas says the headline reads, Ivermectin causes sterilization in 85% of men, study finds. The effects of ivermectin therapy on human males can have an effect on men's reproductive health. Researchers at 3 universities in Nigeria studied the effects of ivermectin, which is used to treat river blindness and other medical conditions in humans, on men's sperm count. According to their study, 85% of men who take ivermectin become sterilized. Ivermectin is often used as an anthelmintic to combat parasites in animals, and some people have been using it to fight COVID-19 despite health experts' recommendations against it. The study conducted by researchers in Nigeria screened 385 patients with river blindness to investigate the effects of ivermectin on sperm function. The researchers found 85% of all male patients treated in a particular center with ivermectin in a recent past who went to the laboratory for routine tests were discovered to have developed various forms, grades, and degrees of sperm dysfunction. Dysfunctions include the following: low sperm count, poor sperm quality, azoospermia, or the absence of motile sperm, and poor sperm mobility. There was a significant drop in sperm counts of the patients after their treatment with ivermectin, the study's authors concluded. The United States Food and Drug Administration has not authorized or approved ivermectin treatment or preventing COVID-19 in humans or animals, but across the country, people have been self-medicating using animal-grade ivermectin. Never use medications intended for animals on yourself or other people. Animal ivermectin products are very different from those approved for humans. Use of animal ivermectin for the prevention of treatment of COVID-19 in humans is dangerous, reports the FDA. Dr. Ogachika Alozi, infectious disease expert in El Paso, said to use tried and true methods of COVID-19 treatment. The reality is this: the things that we know work so far, dexamethasone, acetmra, remdesivir in the hospital, things that work before you go to the hospital, like antibody infusions and vaccines, may have loads more data than ivermectin, he said. Clinical trials evaluating ivermectin tablets can be used to treat COVID-19 are ongoing, but there's currently no data available to suggest efficacy in fighting the virus. Bottom line, vaccines are the best way to combat COVID-19. I get that people are scared. I get that people are worried, but it puzzles me that people would use something with such little data compared to something that has such great data and we know works.
Okay, all right. Hold on a second, because this is important. Okay, so one, if you have genetic predisposition to heart attacks in your family or pulse issues, and you're slightly overweight, which is a lot of males, and you're under the age of 50, you should be very, very careful in taking the Pfizer vaccine. Now, what the reason you're seeing a lot of this anti-ivermectin stuff in a Nigerian study, I mean, really, the reason you're seeing a lot of this is because if there are potential treatments like hydroxychloroquine, which, by the way, I was one of the first people in the West to get COVID, as far as we know. Like I think it was in February 2020. Um,
they prescribed me hydroxychloroquine, and I was better like within a few days. And then of course took azithromax to deal with the issues of all the mucus in your lungs. So this idea now, the reason they're doing this, by the way, is that the emergency use authorization that's in effect by the FDA, they can only get that for vaccines if there aren't other available treatments out there. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of this pressure. Now, the pharmaceutical industry in the United States, and I say this as somebody who's traded stocks in the past of pharmaceutical companies, what they do is they cannot be sued because of the 1986 law. So much in the same way that a lot of the tech companies can't be sued because of CDA 230 over things that are on their platform. They get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they, of course, affect the discourse around these issues. Now, we need to be very careful on what CDC says. I mean, we've seen them reverse themselves. The United States intelligence services tried to claim incredibly that the coronavirus didn't come from a lab, when, of course, all of our allies were saying that it came from a lab, including our, of course, most treasured ally, the Brits. So I know it's like low class and low status, and you should just shut up and get your vaccine. But it really depends who you are. Now, for the general population, vaccines are harmless, but for a certain percentage of population here, we don't really know. And what evidence we've seen for the myocarditis issues for people who do have bad hearts or who have history of heart attacks in their family, they should take this very seriously. Now, if you're a very thin Japanese person, or you're very thin, and young, a person of Nordic heritage, maybe you don't need a vaccine. But if you're a fat, tubby, older person, you probably do need one. And you may need several vaccines, and you may need to lose some weight too, because that's a good way to stay alive.
Okay.
Anyway, end of
So,
rant.
yes.
Tyler, if I
Sure.
can just, sorry to interrupt. Two things I wanted to say. One is I don't know how you deal with these kind of requests, but I received a private message from someone in the audience that wanted to respond to something that was brought
Mm-hmm.
up on one of the other topics. His name is, I
Uh-huh.
think, Hossein Zamzam, his Zamzam. So he just asked me if I could ask you
Okay.
to pull him up. That's that. And also, Charles, I just want to say I agree. I mean, I've definitely taken vaccines throughout my entire life. I've gone to overseas trips, and I've had no problems with it. But it is something that is not been, we haven't even tested it for a 24-month period. And there are doctors out there. I mean, I'm sure you probably heard of him, Dr. Zev, Vladimir Zelenko, who has protocols on these whether it's ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, and he's had 99% efficiency towards for his patients. I mean, there's definitely a huge conversation, and it is true that from everything that I see from different journals, that this is, for some people, maybe it is good to get this vaccine, depending on their genetics and their, if they have other, underlying issues. But it is not a one size fits all situation. And this is why there's been such a huge issue worldwide when it comes into mandating and forcing someone that may not be good for them, that it may have an absolute adverse reaction for them, and
Yeah,
possibly kill
yeah.
them
And by
down
the
the
way,
line.
I should say, friends of mine who work at CDC, like, they know this, and we've had this conversation where they'll say, "Look, based upon our calculations, we percentage of the U.S. population that will suffer effects from the vaccine, from the Pfizer one. I can't speak to the other ones, but the Pfizer one's the one.
Yes.
And we know that, but we accept that negative risk because there's insurance programs, there's all there's basically a pool, a claim that people can claim against. They but they made the calculation that for the larger amount of the population, it does make sense to be vaccinated, and they are in fact right. Like, they'll tell you this privately, like the ones who are not just total shills hoping to go work for big pharma afterwards. But in any event, I strongly encourage people to do their own genetics on this, to look at their own family history, and I think for most people it'll be perfectly fine. But I do think, like, there's a reason our British allies are being much slower on some of these things, and there's a reason that's they're much further ahead of us on genetics, and there's a reason for that. So anyway, I don't want to, like, belabor the point, but I do think we need to be just because somebody's
Okay,
a crazy anti-vaxxer
okay.
doesn't mean they're
We
totally
we
nuts.
have
You know.
So
two. We
Charles,
had hold on,
Charles,
Messi.
Just
so
to
We
add
had
on that
two
one.
Swedes raise their hand, and I suspect they want to address. Maybe that's not a coincidence, but let's see.
Just
Yeah,
real quick, Tyler, just because Charles, you and I are friends. So being that you were in early February 2020, and we've discovered that if you got COVID and get the vaccine, you
well,
have
there was
the
a headline yesterday that said there's an interesting observation that people who went in the following sequence. They got a traditional alpha COVID, and then they got an mRNA vaccine. That those people have incredibly superior resistance to even Delta. That it really wipes out all the new variants better than anything else we've noticed before. That somehow that combination of being exposed to alpha and then an mRNA in that order, not necessarily everybody who fits that description, but some percentage of those people are miraculously um, able to defend themselves against other new variants.
Yeah, a cousin of mine has gotten COVID twice now. First in I think March of 2020, and then again about a month ago. And each time, the subsequent time, it's been less mild. I mean, it's been more mild rather than the first time through. So this might be something that I think people are just going to get, and they're going to have to figure out, how they deal with it. But wouldn't it be nice if we had a public health campaign to like people lose weight, change their diet? I mean, the price of meat is very high now. Maybe some people could go vegetarian, lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. Maybe we could fund a lot of the disruption in our lives through a soda tax or a
So
fast
now we've
food
got three.
tax.
Hold on. I'm
There's
getting
lots
all
of
the Swedes
solutions.
wanting to jump up on stage simultaneously. So I want to see. I want to see what Swedbliss has in mind. Yeah.
Oh, welcome, welcome.
While they come up, Tyler, I have a definition question because I know that this tech news room is.
Dave, hold on. Let this.
Swedbliss
Are
is
they
up.
up though? Sorry, the Swedes up. Sorry. Oh, apologies.
Hi,
Okay,
Emma.
bye.
Hi everyone. I actually got into this conversation right in the middle, and so can someone
Uh,
just catch me up so I'm not
okay, so
just
it's all right. But
answering the
hang on.
wrong
I
thing
want to
here.
see if maybe Annika's comment. She had her hand up, so maybe Annika's comment might help fill in the gaps.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to chime in on the Swedish elderly and the Swedish
Uh huh.
immigrant problem when it comes to COVID. So, firstly, our health authorities were remarkably resistant to the idea of face masks. I mean, ridiculously. Usually in medicine, it's like, if something can be beneficial and it don't cause harm, use it in case it's useful. Here it was like this absurd, rabid resistance towards face masks, like you can find with the most conservative Republicans in the U.S. And it's not until this year that was like, yes, sure, maybe. And the reason I think for that is that early in the pandemic, Sweden didn't have enough supplies
Right.
of face masks. So the unions, labor unions, threatened to shut down the entire Swedish elder care if their members didn't get
Ah.
enough PPE. And since that would cause a catastrophe, it was basically, said that, you just have
Right.
a face shield, and that of course doesn't help. Secondly, with the Swedish elder care, it's important to understand that when Swedish seniors come to the elderly care facilities, they are usually 85 and over, and in case of more or less hospital care, they are terminal. So it's usually they have 6 months to a year, if that, to live. So this large death toll among the Swedish elderly were offset by that the previous flu season was much lower than in Norway, for instance. So you basically had a lot of definitely very sick elderly people sort of on death's door before even the COVID epidemic started. And of course, then we have the third component, which is the immigrant areas where there was a lot of disinformation that still continues. People think that you will die within 2 years if you get the vaccine, or you will turn into a zombie. Don't laugh; it's a real thing. Since a lot of immigrants mainly watch channels and social media in their home countries. Most of the people working, especially in the large city areas within the elder care, are immigrants. So there's a connection with all, elder care, immigrant areas, and the sort of government failure to, one, protect the immigrants who are also bus drivers, for instance, and there we didn't get any, shielding for the bus drivers until this summer, more or less. So now they're completely enclosed. And they didn't move buses from richer areas that could work from home to poorer areas which relies on local transport and where people actually need to go to work and can't work from home. So there's a sort of consequence that sort of fault and lack of planning that should be targeting the government's failure to plan and act. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the short distance. Oh, and also in Gothenburg, there's about 100,000 people in a city of 300,000, 400,000 that are unvaccinated and remain so. And of course, all of them are mostly in the immigrant areas. So we have a bubble waiting to explode with.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Yes.
Unmute button. Yes, I was just partly chiming in, partly because I have 3 doctors sitting next to me screaming every time they hear anything about not vaccinating, because they've all worked, especially my dad, he's worked 2 pandemics and several epidemics. And of course, they all agree that there is absolutely nothing that is at higher risk. Now I'm quoting, since none of us here on stage are medical professionals, I think, maybe 1 or 2, that there is nothing that is higher risk than the risk of getting this goddamn COVID. And I myself, who is one of those people who had very, very mild case of COVID, and I'm going to the Karolinska in Stockholm where they have a post-COVID clinic. I have inflammations everywhere around all my organs, and it's just like never ending. And there's a mutual friend of ours, Tyler, who has a 17-year-old daughter who's really ill post and also had it very mild. But that I just wanted to chime in on the personal front. Then also, Annika, at least, yes, there are groups where it's really sad that they are not vaccinating, but we are still way above 7 million people in this country are vaccinated, which is amazing. And even against the variants, of course, you can still get it, but this is why globally the death rates are down. Last comment was to this increased antibody. I myself have that it's 6 times higher now than just when I tested the first time for antibodies was in April this year. And after being vaccinated, it's crazy high. And I just wanted to add what my father said, that there's a big study in the UK out of Oxford and of course together with Johns Hopkins on that on a very large basis, that those who have got the vaccine after having the infection being through COVID have at least 6 times higher resistance, which of course is amazing.
And
that's
thanks, Sarah. We got to move off of COVID because we got way too many headlines to jump into here. The next one up is the U.S. Commerce Department says it's forming the National AI Advisory Committee. which will help advise the President of the United States and federal agencies on AI research, competitiveness, and more. The Department of Commerce has set up a committee to advise the President and other federal agencies on AI issues. And experts in AI intelligence is looking for leaders to join. So they're asking for AI experts to join this AI advisory committee to help the nation make appropriate policies. Let's hope they get the right advisors on that committee. My God. National committee will advise the president. Yep. So next one up.
Just has to join it.
The
Just in case over facial rec, they asked me and they asked a few of my other friends to join it. I haven't given an answer yet.
The next one's from Bloomberg that FOIA records show Google settled with software engineer allegedly fired for his workplace activism in 2019. Settlement was approved in July by the NLRB, the labor board. And is this who I think it is? Google has settled a suit with software engineer who the U.S. Labor Board alleged was fired for his workplace activism. One of the 5 employees the government recently accused the company of terminating for exercising their legally protected rights. The private settlement between Google and fired employee Lawrence Berland, so it's not the person I thought it was approved in July, and the terms were not disclosed. Google, which has denied wrongdoing, and Berland's attorney declined to comment on the settlement. Okay, so not much to find out there. Okay, so the next one is from Bloomberg that NVIDIA requests the EU Commission approval of its ARM acquisition beginning in the EU's official provisional deadline for ruling is October 13th. Elon Musk has come out to say he hopes this doesn't go through. They don't want to see more consolidation in the chip space. I think generally most people are hoping it doesn't go through for the same reason as Elon Musk, which is consolidation in the chip space isn't likely to benefit folks who need a lot of chips.
Is that your view on it, Tyler? Because I know that back in May we spent about 6 weeks in this room debating the chips and TSMC, etc.
Yeah, but
have a strong point of view on it.
NVIDIA acquiring ARM. I mean, NVIDIA is already an absolute powerhouse in AI and chips, and acquiring ARM would really boost them to the front of the chip race. But it would. I think it's better that they operate independent. I mean, myself personally, I have no dog in that fight at all. What I'm noticing is that people whose businesses depend on chips don't want NVIDIA to acquire ARM. And I believe that
ARM is just the.
Go ahead, Chris.
Isn't ARM just the intellectual property arm of the wrong word, but like isn't that just the IP? Like the foundries make the chips to the ARM specs, I thought.
ARM is fabless.
Yeah. So I don't know, honestly, because I don't follow semiconductors as deeply enough to properly give my own opinion on the point. What I'm saying is the people who oppose it.
Essentially, Tyler, why this is a big deal. So, because Chris Fortnov's not here. Remember Intel? We ran what are like 386, 486, Pentium 2. Those are all what are running on what's CISC, complex instruction set computing, and ARM and Motorola on the old Macs used to run what's called RISC, reduced instruction set. Yeah, and so when we switch from CISC to RISC, we saw a huge boost in energy as well as processing because the instruction set's more efficient, and so it's able to handle a lot more. So what you're seeing right now, especially with Apple's M1, is they're leveraging their experience with RISC processing to really take advantage of all the different architectures. Like if you've ever run the speed tests on the M1, it's blowing away like not supercomputers, but like servers and workstations that are like $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, and it's like on a $700 MacBook.
Okay, so the next headline's from Slate. It says, as car makers use infotainment systems to stand out from competitors, essentially turning your dashboard into a massive screen, video games and karaoke and everything else. This essentially unregulated displays are becoming flashy, feature-packed distractions, and can lead to a lot of accidents in the near future. So we will see if how the data looks on those cars that have those infotainment, video games on their screens.
Yeah, and a nice link with. Remember yesterday you had that story of the. It wasn't the brain computer interface, but it was like like you were talking about the ping pong, and you could go from left to right. I think the sooner that's introduced, the less of those potential accidents
Yep.
that you're calling out,
The next one is just a reminder that Apple has their annual event coming up on Tuesday, which we will live stream as usual, announcing the new iPhones and the new Apple Watch Series 7s and possibly the MacBook Pros 14-inch and 16-inch, and maybe, just maybe, some AR, VR look forward. And then the next one is from Bloomberg. Singapore-based online gaming and e-commerce company called SEA announces new secondary offering in stock. Who cares? The next one, that's from CNBC. Amazon says it's bringing its cashierless, just walk out the goddamn door tech to 2 Whole Food stores, one in California, one in the DC area, set to open next year, where you authenticate with your phone as you walk into the Whole Foods, or with your palm print, interestingly, without your phone, and then you pick up whatever you want, throw it in your cart, and walk the fuck out. And they know what you took out the store, and they charge you accordingly, which is a brilliant concept of limiting your ability to enter the store until you authenticate. Although in this case, you do have the option of using a human checkout or self-checkout. But the idea that stopping people from entering the store until they authenticate and then letting them take whatever they want, walk out the door, that could solve the problems that Walgreens is having in San Francisco, where people are walking in with empty grocery bags and trash bags. And
It's a $45 billion
yeah.
industry.
Anyway, the next
For a company that could help solve that problem. If only there was something that could be done.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the state of Illinois and Google shouldn't be suing me through the ACLU to do that. I don't know. Just a thought. Not that I'm salty or anything.
Aviva Links, which aims to make chips to enable low latency data sharing in connected cars, raises $26.5 million. And documents show Microsoft and Amazon Web Services secured contracts worth $50 million total that appear linked to the Pentagon's Project Maven following Google's exit. And then Twitter says it's testing edge-to-edge pictures and videos in tweets on iOS. And what's the next one up here? Transition from here. Mobile game publisher Jam City raises $350 million. And Shutterstock acquires Seattle-based online photo editing service PicMonkey. And there's a book coming out by Microsoft President Brad Smith and his Chief of Staff Carol Ann Brown about the SolarWinds attacks. And the excerpt of the book itself has become a popular article through Fast Company. And he talks about that. It just says about the KGB and how they hacked into the new versions of the KGB, which is the FSB and the SVR, and how they were all up into America's political system.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm very surprised if Brad Smith is there in the next year or so. He's not well liked in our intel world, and I think this is a big mistake for him writing this book.
What else is here?
Covering his own ass, in other words.
It's an interesting read. The other interesting articles that people are tweeting.
Yeah, I would note, by the way, that Peggy Johnson, who was one of the key architects and one of the few women, very successful women out there, at Microsoft, has left Microsoft,
and Brad Smith is still there, and that's quite interesting. I would just point that
Okay,
out.
so
But pay attention to
okay,
this. Is what I'm saying.
now we
Yep.
turn to the tweets everyone's been waiting for. Wait, whoa. Researchers finds Chinese influence group trying to mobilize U.S. COVID protests, and a wide-ranging pro-Chinese influence group is attempting to use social media platforms and other forums to mobilize physical protests around COVID concerns in the U.S. Researchers released Wednesday. Cybersecurity group called Mandiant Threat Intelligence found evidence that the pro-People's Republic of China group behind the protest efforts, first discovered in 2019, has expanded from using traditional social media sites like Facebook and Twitter to being found on 30 social media sites and 40 other websites and forums, while Mandiant noted that no successful protests had been seen as a result of the efforts of the group's calls for physical protest. The group's efforts have increased, with Mandiant finding evidence of the group posting in at least 7 languages across sites to get their messaging out. We've observed extensive promotion of Russian, German, Spanish, Korean, Japanese language content on US and non-US based platforms, in addition to typical English and Chinese language activity that has been widely reported on. This represents a significant development in our collective understanding of this pro-PRC activity set. Posts discovered by Mandiant researchers linked to the influence operations include those in multiple languages attempting to cast doubt on the origins of COVID-19 virus, with several posts in multiple languages claiming it originated in the US instead of in China. Other posts prompted Asian Americans to protest US racial injustice. So it seems the CCP has a very keen interest in provoking protests around COVID and Asian hate in the US. And then Evan sends in this article about war in space inevitable as China's race to weaponize many escalate into conflict with US experts warn. Who's the source? It's from the UK, The Sun, so I guess we take it with a grain of salt. The headline reads, "A war in space inevitable as China's race to weaponize may escalate into conflict with US experts warn." Okay, who are the experts? A defense analyst, Eugene Goltz, thinks an arms race is already underway as Beijing tries to compete with the US in space. Some US officials fear that the weaponization of space is inevitable, an expert says. China launched the first part of its space station into orbit in April, flexing its technological muscles. The Chinese government has also revealed ambitions to send astronauts to Mars during the 2030s. Goltz says investing in space technology is considered an acceptable form of public chest thumping in China. Meanwhile, many Americans view technological prowess outside of its defense of and national security, according to the expert. He said, "We don't set it as inherently connected." Goltz believed a Cold War in space between Washington and Beijing is very likely as China pushes its ambitions. He said some people fear that efforts in space will overlap with military and strategic efforts. China's more militarized approach to technology might have an implication for an arms race. There's a reasonable chance that techno-nationalism could spill over into developing space weapons. Goltz thinks the U.S. has a lot more to lose in space if space becomes a battleground in the future. He claims that some U.S. military officials think that the weaponization of space is inevitable due to great power competition. He says, if a hot war comes, it's going to be tremendously destructive. There's a risk of real large-scale destruction. He warned, if people fill up orbit with space junk because we fight wars there, it will be very expensive to get rid of the junk, and it might prohibit our ability to use space in other ways. Okay, so thank you for that one, Evan. The next one is from the Washington Post, from someone in the audience with the Twitter account RCC. A new federal study shows pandemic safety net helped prevent widespread hunger during the pandemic. The U.S. Department of Agriculture releases first complete government calculation of 2020 hunger surge, revealing the success of the pandemic safety net program. Okay. The next one, also from RCC, this time from Fortune, says Germany's sovereign cloud is coming and it's provided by Google. Deutsche Telekom's system will control access to the data. And this is the first headline I've seen of the word sovereign cloud in an actual headline, this time by Fortune. And it says Germany's sovereign cloud is coming and it's provided by Google. And I told you sovereign clouds were coming 3 months ago with those exact words, because that's the internal parlance of the companies themselves, like AWS and Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure. And I was told, I've said this story many times, I first became familiar with this on my train ride into Paris from Charles de Gaulle Airport with a friend of mine who works at Amazon Web Services. And I said, what are you doing in Paris? And he says, I'm here because of sovereign clouds. I said, what's a sovereign cloud? This is 3 years ago. And he says, well, the governments are all realizing they need to control their own, all the data within their geographies, their sovereign territories. And they want to have sovereign clouds. And these...
Did you say the Germany sovereign
Yes.
cloud is on Google? And then Google is accessible by US
Perhaps.
government, right? What's sovereign about
Well,
that?
Germany is going to insist that they have exclusive control of everything and that America not have access to it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Germany, here's the quote, here's the article. Germany has, along with France, been a driving force behind Europe's quest to cloud sovereignty. Well, there you go. It says France right in the first sentence around cloud sovereignty, and that, ironically, that's where I was 3 years ago on the train with someone from AWS saying exactly that France was very keen on sovereign clouds. When the countries announced plans for a European cloud network called Gaia X a couple years back, the idea was for European enterprises not to have to rely on foreign providers for the foundations of their online services and internal data wrangling. Now Germany's getting a sovereign cloud that will target sectors such as automotive and healthcare along with the private sector when it launches next year. It will be run by T-Systems, the Deutsche Telekom-owned systems integrator that is one of Gaia X's founding members, in partnership with a distinctly non-European cloud giant that is Google. It is not clear how Google and T-Systems' sovereign cloud might relate to Gaia X network, which is supposed to offer interoperability between participating partners, which include Google as well as Microsoft and Amazon. The idea is to keep U.S. companies out. Did not last long, a fact that has particularly irked the French. Google said over a week ago that it would invest $1.2 billion in its German cloud infrastructure over the next decade, and Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian reiterated Wednesday that the American tech giant was committed to helping enable Germany's digital transformation. The sovereign cloud that Google and T-Systems, he said in a statement, will provide public and private sector organizations with an additional layer of technical and operational measures and controls that ensure German customers can meet their data operational and software sovereignty requirements. The term data sovereignty means more than just data localization, which is the practice of storing data from certain countries' citizens or governments in that country itself. This is something that countries such as China and Russia mandate, and that the less authoritarian EU at least tries to encourage through its General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which places strict conditions on exporting personal data outside the Union. Data sovereignty is also about who gets access to the data, a particularly hot topic when it comes to American cloud providers. That's thanks to the U.S.'s 2018 Cloud Act, which gives U.S. prosecutors access to data stored by those providers in foreign data centers, and to a ruling by the EU's top court last year that threatens transatlantic data flows because of the U.S.'s invasive online surveillance practices. Under T-Systems and Google's arrangement, T-Systems will handle things like customers' encryption and identity management, and both companies will have to supervise any access to their joint facilities in Germany. T-Systems will be able to scrutinize Google software's updates before they are deployed. This will be a public cloud physically separate from Google Cloud that German companies can already use, but the providers are promising full public cloud scale as well as a version and feature parity to the global network. Even so, there's your answer, Cheryl. Google doesn't manage it. The Germans manage it themselves, according to this.
Hope so.
Even stricter compliance requirements for public sector institutions will be addressed, T-Systems CEO Adel Al-Saleh said in the statement. We are happy that we'll be able to offer customers a cloud solution that is secure and sovereign, but also gives access to the innovation and scalability of Google Cloud in Germany. The CEO of T-Systems, who's going to be the manager of the cloud, which is Deutsche Telekom, said Austria and Switzerland were being considered for similar upcoming projects. This is not the first time that T-Systems has tried such an offering. The last time was in 2015 with Microsoft as the partner. At the time, Microsoft launched new data centers in Germany that were controlled by T-Systems, which acted as a data trustee. Under that structure, Microsoft was unable to access the data without customers' permission, and T-Systems got to supervise access when that permission was granted. However, updates to the service lagged behind those of Microsoft's standard Azure Cloud Infrastructure Platform. The German-specific service was more expensive than regular Azure and reportedly harder to use. Microsoft axed the offering in 2018. A couple of weeks ago, T-Systems announced a cloud privacy service for Microsoft public cloud users in Germany, encrypting data before it hits Microsoft servers and decrypting it on the return journey. Meanwhile, Microsoft had reportedly proposed a sovereign cloud for Germany's federal and other governments. So as we've discussed, it's ostensibly a threat to the Google, Amazon, Microsoft clouds services in Europe unless they give Europe what it wants, which is utter, complete control. And if they do, then it's a huge business opportunity. And of course, they're going to do, they'll go for the money every time. At the end of the day, they will happily take the money to provide the solution. And if Europe's willing to pay so that they don't have access to the data, they'll happily take that money all day long. So the question is, will America let them do that? Is it, to me, the big question.
No. I mean, the answer is no. I mean, there's no way that this will be allowed to happen in the way that it's described in this Fortune article. It's just not going to be permitted. If Germany wants to stay in NATO and, if they want to continue having the good relations. By the way, why would Google piss off the U.S. government
Well, it seems to
this
be all
much?
three. I think all three are going to be caught in the middle of this, and the U.S. is going to decide if they're going to be allowed to do it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would be extremely shocked to see. I mean, the Amazon one with France makes a lot of sense because, the French have much more intelligence sharing than the Germans do in the past. So I wouldn't be, Amazon's clearly going to do the French contract and be sort of integrated there. But Google, no, I don't see it in Germany. Not for anything serious, not for intelligence related work, for sure not.
That you could, I mean, for those who don't, remember history, the Coca-Cola was not allowed to sell Coke to Germany during the World Wars, and so they made Fanta, and that's why you have orange Fanta today, because they weren't allowed to sell Coke, wasn't allowed to sell Coke, so they still wanted to do business with Germany. Germany still wanted to drink soda, so Coca-Cola made a whole new brand and forgot to tell America that they were doing business with Germany. So could Google Cloud do the same and make a whole new, orange flavored cloud to sell the Germans? If America's
Well, it seems to be the when they make that orange flavor cloud, Tyler, the only thing that they're going to miss is like the whole innovation and upgrade path that everyone else is on. So it seems like that would be the slight downside to it. But yeah, I don't know.
So the next headline is this is going to get really interesting to see. And as Charles says, America is very likely to say, nope, can't do that. But it's going to come down to meetings between the U.S. and France and U.S. and Germany. And
well, you'll note like Eric Schmidt has been running around talking about the importance of innovation and the military and Google and all that. And he's been more or less ignored by the U.S. military, other than like some perfunctory articles here and there. So I think Google and Facebook, I mean, they're increasingly on the outs. When Google turned down Project Maven, that was not a smart move. And that's going to be a real issue for them moving
So the
forward.
next one is from Forbes, that companies are paying $100,000 sign-on bonuses to attract workers in an effort to entice people to join their companies. Businesses have resorted to something we haven't seen before. They are offering lush sign-on bonuses up to $100,000 to attract workers during the Great Resignation. The nearly 2-year-old ordeal of coping with a deadly virus made Americans reevaluate their lives, jobs, and careers. People from all socioeconomic backgrounds started thinking about what they really want to do with their lives. Millions decided to quit their jobs or take time to figure out what is the next best step in their careers. They received the messages loud and clear. We have only one life to live. It's short, precious, and it's imperative to make the best of it. The new philosophy has caused headaches for businesses. It made it harder for them to find workers. The U.S. government reported there are over 10 million new jobs open. This number is larger than the amount of people in between positions. Despite the plethora of jobs, people are taking their sweet time to find the perfect fit. In an effort to entice people to join their companies, businesses have resorted to something we haven't seen. They're offering lush sign-on bonuses of up to $100,000 to attract top talent. According to global data, the leading analytics company, a supply crunch for talent has pushed companies to go the extra mile and offer sign-on bonuses that can extend to an impressive $100,000 for specialty jobs. There you go.
I think that wave started before COVID, and probably COVID just drove it home for so many
The
people.
next one is from Wired. In the U.S., the AI industry risks becoming winner take most. A new study illustrates just how geographically concentrated AI activity has become. A new study warns that the American AI industry is highly concentrated in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that this could prove to be a weakness in the long run. The Bay Area leads all other regions of the country in AI research and investment activity, accounting for about 1/4 of AI conference papers, patents, and companies in the U.S. Bay Area metro areas see levels of AI activity 4 times higher than other top cities for AI development. When you have a high percentage of all AI activity in the Bay Area metros, you may be over-concentrating, losing diversity, and getting groupthink in the algorithmic economy. It locks in winner takes most dimensions to this sector, and that's where we hope that federal policy will begin to invest in new and different AI clusters in new and different places to provide a balance or counter. Mark Merrill, policy director at the Brookings Institution and the study's author, told Wired. The study, titled The Geography of AI, ranks nearly 400 U.S. metro areas based on their capabilities of AI using metrics like AI job listings, early-stage company creation data, and Crunchbase published research, and the federal research and developing funding have found that 2/3 of AI activity is just in 15 metro areas, largely along coastlines. The two superstars of San Francisco and San Jose, plus 13 other early adopter locales like Austin and Seattle. Meanwhile, more than half of the metro areas together accounted for just 5% of the activity. And I wonder if this research took into the account that a lot of this AI talent is coming out of schools with very specific geographies that also happen to be the same 5 geographies that he's finding out. It turns out it's the fucking schools, you dumbass. It's Stanford and MIT. That's exactly where this shit's gonna happen, you fucking idiot. This is not rocket science. AI experts come learn from other AI experts in universities. It's the schools. Holy fucking shit, this researcher's a dumbass. My God. Oh, my dear sweet Jesus. It's not rocket science. They're learning it from their professors in the universities. And that now you know why the AI professors at MIT and Stanford are being paid 10 times their current salaries to relocate to China, because China does understand that, unlike this researcher who clearly does not. So the next article is from Gizmodo, from someone in the audience with the Twitter handle RCC, that a laser fired through a keyhole can expose everything inside the room. If you're worried about privacy, it might be time to cover up your front door's peephole. How does this work? So I'm just tweeted it out from Gizmodo. Being able to see inside a closed room was a skill once reserved for superheroes, but researchers from Stanford's computer imaging lab, oh my god, it's the schools, it's Stanford, oh my god, Stanford again, have expanded on a technique called non-line of sight imaging, so that just a single point of a laser lighted in entering a room can be used to see what physical objects might be inside. Non-line of sight, NLOS, imaging is by no means a new idea. It's a clever technique that's been refined in research labs over the years to create cameras that can remarkably see around corners and generate images of objects that otherwise aren't in the camera's field of view, or are blocked by a series of obstacles. Previously, the technique has leveraged flat surfaces like doors or walls that are in line of sight of both the camera and the obstructed object. A series of light pulses originating from a camera, usually from lasers, bounces off the surfaces and then bounces off hidden objects before eventually making their way back to the camera sensors. Algorithms, AIs, then use the information about how long it took those reflections to return to generate an image of what the camera can't see. The results are high resolution, but they're usually detailed enough, or they aren't high resolution, but they are usually detailed enough to easily determine what the objects in question are. So these algorithms that they're developing at Stanford where is that? Oh, it's in Silicon Valley. Oh, it's a university. Oh, they're doing algorithms. Oh, they're AIs. Oh, shit. These AIs are coming from the fucking universities. Stanford. Where have I heard that name? Stanford what? Stanford University. Oh, holy shit, guys. I think we figured it out. I think we just figured it out. All of these AIs are coming from universities. Holy shit. Yeah.
So Tyler, I have a question. By what can you cover the keyhole with? I mean, can a post-it
Yes,
ruin
on the
the whole
inside of the door,
situation?
anything could, yeah. The keyhole imaging technique, developed by researchers at Stanford University's Computational Imaging Lab, is so named because all that's needed to see what's inside a closed room is a tiny hole, such as a keyhole or a peephole, large enough to shine a laser beam through, creating a single dot of light on a wall. As with previous experiments, the laser light bounces off a wall, an object in the room, and then off the wall again, with countless photons eventually being reflected back through the hole and to the camera, which utilizes a single photon avalanche photodetector to measure the timing of the return. Stanford University's Computational Imaging Lab doing algorithms. Fantastic. I think we just figured out something big that the researcher in the last paper might want to figure out. Where is all the AI happening? Why is it all condensed around, Boston and the Bay Area? It's a real riddle. It's an absolute fucking mystery. So the next one is from RCC, from the Wall Street Journals. Why hackers love smart buildings. Well, that seems somewhat related to the last article. Here we go. When all of a building's systems are online, the cybersecurity risks become much greater. Buildings are getting smarter, and that opens them up to a host of new cyber attack risks. In recent years, building managers increasingly have relied on internet connections and computer networks to manage pretty much any part of a building you can think of, including elevators, escalators, ventilators, heating and air conditioning systems, often machines like printers and conference room audiovisual equipment, security and fire safety systems, and appliances like refrigerators and coffee makers. These smart technologies can make buildings more efficient and monitor maintenance and repair needs, allowing building operators to address problems proactively rather than fixing malfunctions as they occur. During the pandemic, they have made it easier to monitor airflow and people's movements within buildings. Smart buildings satisfy a lot of things that we're trying to do in real estate, says Jason Lunda, managing director of commercial real estate services company. He says, among other things, it allows building managers to create more sustainable green buildings. You get the idea. All of those things being managed technologically is a good thing. Mr. Lund says the backside of it is that all of them become hackable. Today's buildings are getting smarter and more hackable. If it's connected to the internet, and heaven forbid it touches anything Microsoft, it will be easily exploited. So yes, your coffee machine is spying on you. Well, your connected coffee machine, it tells more about the network it's on, and then the hackers then go from the coffee machine over to the printer, and there's the smart camera on port 886. And now we got the camera inside the building. And I noticed there's some other, now that I'm looking at the camera, I notice you have a smart TV. We happen to know how to penetrate that smart TV, which has a microphone. And now we're listening. And you just said your password to your bank account? Thank you, Susie. We love you, sweetheart. And now we've got your bank account. It's not that difficult, folks. That's why there's a lot of 16-year-olds in Russia doing it and making a nice living doing it. So the next one is from Rolf Lindstrom via Engadget. The headline from Engadget reads that LG claims its new real folding window display material is as hard as glass and it folds like paper. And that could be interesting because you can and this has been decades in the making of having foldable displays. And there's also, interestingly, companies working on glass-like solar panels that are totally transparent, like glass. So you can have smart buildings with where you don't need solar panels on the roof. The actual windows of the skyscrapers themselves are solar panels. That's now real. There's a company out of Sweden making a killing right now on exactly that. So the combination of glass, solar panels, and foldable glass, then it gets really, really interesting. But the foldable glass is now a real thing. LG claims its new real folding window display material is as hard as glass. And so now you'll have foldable devices with foldable glass, like paper-like glass, as strong as normal glass. So the next one's from MSN, from Ken, that Amazon rips into Elon Musk in its dispute over Starlink, saying his companies believe rules are for other people. And so what exactly are they Amazon ripped into SpaceX and Elon Musk in its latest FCC filing over Starlink complaint. The company said that SpaceX CEO believes rules are for other people. The letter comes a week after SpaceX said Bezos' lawsuits were hindering the company's progress. Amazon ripped into Elon Musk's in its latest filing. The conduct of SpaceX and other Musk-led companies makes their view plain. Rules are for other people, and those who insist upon or even simply request compliance are deserving of derision and ad hominem attacks. A letter from Amazon to the FCC said. The letter, first reported by CNBC, comes just a week after SpaceX responded to Amazon's protest. At that time, the space company said Jeff Bezos' lawsuit had become a bigger bottleneck than the technology, pointing out that Bezos-owned companies, including Amazon and Blue Origin, had filed complaints against SpaceX roughly every 16 days this year. Musk said on Twitter that suing SpaceX was Bezos' new full-time job. In its most recent letter to the FCC, Amazon said the SpaceX letter was an overheated response to an uncontroversial argument. The company said the response failed to address the issue and focused primarily on attacking Amazon instead. It is with a sigh that Amazon responds to SpaceX's recent attacks on Amazon, which takes this familiar tack in order to distract from the actual problem. The letter said the approach comes from the playbook familiar to any regulator faced with the unfortunate task of even-handedly applying its rules to SpaceX. Concede nothing, ignore rules whenever possible, and when all else fails, malign those that invoke them. The Amazon letter also focuses on criticizing Musk, saying that SpaceX CEO demonstrates an unwillingness to comply with rules and government authorities, and pointing out reports from the Wall Street Journal on Musk's war on regulators. So, no love there between Jeff and Elon.
Who's going to win?
The next.
Well, we all know it's going to be Jeff Bezos, right? I mean, we know this. Does anyone want to take bets here? You know, anyone? Bueller? Bueller? Anyone want to bet Elon Musk is going to beat Jeff Bezos? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay.
Evan sends in the next one that SpaceX produces 5,000 Starlink dishes per week, but plans a production boost. The company is working to boost the manufacturing later this year as over 600,000 people continue to wait for access to the satellite internet system. I didn't realize it was up to 600,000 now. And Ken sends in the next one from the Wall Street Journal that Peloton sold a dream, but investors are now waking up. Peloton is a different company than the one investors bought 2 years ago in its public offering, and not necessarily a better one, as they're now facing a lot of lawsuits of faulty devices. And Evan sends in the next one from Gizmodo. Headline reads, Facebook users liable for comments under their posts, according to an Australian High Court. The ruling is arguably one of Australia's High Court's dumbest decisions in recent memory, according to Gizmodo. And we covered this yesterday. That companies are now responsible for the idiotic Facebook commenters under their posts on their Facebook pages, according to an Australian court. Evan sends in this one that Amazon opening a $21 million state-of-the-art warehouse in a Tijuana slum, just south of the border, literally on the border. My God, is that close to the border?
I love that photo. That photo is the greatest photo ever. That's like something out of like who's that South African filmmaker, The District 9? It's like something out of one of his movies. Yes. Elysium. It is so good. It's so pretty.
Yeah, I imagine this warehouse potentially could service San Diego because it's much cheaper real estate just on the other side of the border, like literally on the border. I mean, you could stand on the roof and jump over the border. So, yeah, kind of curious. Are they servicing Tijuana from that Amazon warehouse? I obviously, in some sense, but San Diego would seem like a much more attractive market to service from there. Anyway, if they're doing drone deliveries, because you can't, it's not easy to get.
Probably like
that's my point. Right? Yeah, if you're servicing southern San Diego, which is right there on the border, you would need some kind of fast pass system to get through the border, though.
And how does that work with customs, though?
I don't know. That's
You can be pre-cleared. You can be pre-cleared so long as Amazon is shown to do a very good job of basically making sure its workforce is up to snuff. You can be pre-cleared to ship things back and forth. It's happened before.
And so does the customer pay the extra like import tax, or are you saying that all of that is already built into the pricing?
This has now been like 7 years since I checked this, but my understanding on it is that it's built into the price.
It says this month Amazon opens $21 million state-of-the-art warehouse in Tijuana that busts a housing settlement made of cardboard, tarp, and wood scraps along the Tijuana River. And the Tijuana River is the border, by the way. Less than 3 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. And in recent days, images of shiny new warehouse complex emblazoned. A spokesperson for Amazon said, since our arrival in Mexico, Amazon has created more than 15,000 jobs throughout the country, creating employment opportunities with competitive salaries and benefits for all of our employees. Our wages and benefits strengthen local communities, and these investments help these areas to grow and to build better futures. And the Mexican outlet Proceso reported that the mayor of Tijuana had said that the new warehouse will speed up delivery times for Amazon goods within Mexico border city and nearby cities. What do you mean nearby cities?
Yeah, like and nearby
Uh,
cities, San
Ensenada,
Diego.
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
Ensenada's not so nearby. That's about an hour drive from Tijuana.
Yeah, that's a hike.
Um,
But there's so many expats down
oh,
there, right? And
my
with the
family has a
nomad
house just south
workforce.
of down there. Yeah. Yeah, there's the beaches right there in Baja are fucking fantastic. You want good Mexican food? You want good fish
Pretty
tacos?
pretty much everyone I know in SoCal that like really knows how to live the good life is like just south of TJ, all the
Yeah.
way down to the
Puerto
tip.
Nuevo? You want lobsters? You want a lobster dinner that'll blow your effing mind? For
What is
Rosarito
it,
Beach, come
Rosarita
on.
Beach too, or something like?
And some cocaine.
By the way, the
Cocaine's good
pharmacies
too down
have
there.
everything you could
Also,
ever want. Yeah.
also, kidnapping is great this
But
time of
you
year
could
down there.
also,
You
if you
know,
get your dental
somebody.
work done down there, boy, you get quite a deal down there. Yeah, Tijuana, south of Tijuana, that whole Baja down there on the coast it's good living. Um,
I mean, it depends. It depends when you go. I mean, they don't really encourage that much these days. I would wait until there
just
was any
bring
mixed in
just bring a
government,
fake
if I
Rolex
were
with you. You'll be fine. Get you out of any situation.
maybe. I mean that was like that was like in my teen years. In my 30s, it's a bit more dangerous. But I
Charles, bring a
would not
guitar. Learn how
recommend.
to play
Would
La
not
Bamba.
recommend.
Bring a guitar. If shit hits the fan, just start playing La Bamba. It's worked for me every time. I've avoided Mexico.
When was the last time you were in Tijuana, Tyler?
2000, I went down there specifically to Rosarito. I brought a Swedish friend of mine just to see it firsthand up close. That would have been 2013. And by the way, I came back without any ID. I drove down in my car, drove back in my car. When I got to the American border driving back, they said, where's your passport? I said, I don't have a passport. They're like, well, you need a passport. I said, what the hell are you talking about? I need a passport. I've driven over this border 1,000 times. They're like, yeah, well, it's since 9/11, you need a passport. I'm like, well, I didn't bring a passport. And, he stomped his feet or whatever. I'm like, are you do what you got to do? I'm like, here's my driver's license. It says San Diego right on it. And so they let me through and they said, you got to have a passport now. But anyway, yeah, it was all good. It was a good trip. Next one up is from TechCrunch. The 4 things needed to reach Biden's ambitious 2050 solar goal. I'll just save you the suspense. It said better photovoltaics. Where did it go? It disappeared. Sorry. So we'll jump into the next one, which is from PT Yoder. Official emails show the LAPD worked with controversial social media. Say what? This is from a blog called LA Taco, which normally documents the best tacos in LA, I think. Official emails show that the LAPD worked with controversial social media surveillance company during the George Floyd protests. Hundreds of emails from last year show that the LAPD worked with Data Miner, a controversial social media surveillance company, to monitor protesters and journalists' social media outlets during the civil uprisings following the murder of George Floyd. The public records conflict with an earlier statement from the department claiming that they didn't use the system during the Black Lives Matter-led protests. Utilized by governments, law enforcement agencies, and even newsrooms, data miners' products are intended to monitor high-impact events and emerging risks. On their website, they boast about identifying a gas explosion in Manhattan and the Orlando, Florida mass shootings at Pulse nightclub minutes ahead of major news coverage. Backed by a contract with Twitter that gives them exclusive access to tweets directly after they're published, commonly known as the Twitter firehose, and a team of analysts that monitor other social media platforms, Data Miner compiles public information in real time and sells it back to their clients. Last summer, the LAPD told Intercept that they conducted a trial with Data Miner, but chose not to enter into a contract with the company. They also denied that they used data miner in conjunction with early BLM protests following the murder of George Floyd in May and June. However, emails reviewed by LA Taco I love the investigative journalism being done by the good folks over at LA Taco.
Apple, I'd like to report a rising ship.
However, emails reviewed by LA Taco prove that I guess during the pandemic, if tacos aren't being sold, they had to, double down on their.
Is it sad that these guys are doing better than the LA Times and New
or
York
Bloomberg?
Times?
Watch out, Bloomberg! It's LA Taco. They're upping their game. It's not just about salsa anymore. They've moved way beyond, chimichangas.
Without seeing the logo, does it look like LA Gear?
And the logo is done in a very classic Latino, font. I love the font actually.
Okay.
Anyway, so emails reviewed by LA Taco prove that the department was forwarded dozens of tweets, snaps, and Facebook posts and other social media regarding the protests. In one example, Data Miner Alert included an early morning tweet from May 30th reading, "Shots fired in downtown LA, shots fired." 3 minutes later, it was included in one of the Data Miner's first alerts. The brief updates that they send clients, and a minute later sent to LAPD officer Hector Guzman, the officer in charge of Strategic Communications Unit. In another, Data Miner Alert includes a tweet from the reporter of this story while he was on the ground covering BLM organized protests at the Fairfax area on May 30th. Protesters have lit another LAPD patrol car on fire. This was shot inside a local family business on 3rd Street. Our reporter tweeted 3 minutes later, it was included in one of the company's first alerts. Minutes later, the tweet landed in the inbox of Matthew Reyes, an officer with the LAPD Strategic Communications Unit. Yeah. So, LA Taco, let me get this right.
But
I know what happened here. And LA Taco has had just a few two carnitas, it seems, because basically what's happening, I think we all have been part of something where we signed up for a newsletter, and this company provides its content via email. And then if you unsubscribe from that newsletter, but you still continue to get emails from that service, has anybody had that experience? I have it multiple times.
Multiple times.
It's almost like when you click unsubscribe, it like confirms
right. So what they are accusing the LAPD of is receiving emails from a service that they claim they unsubscribed from. So, LA Taco, I welcome you to the world of investigative journalism. But your accusations that the LAPD, that you have seen receipts of the LAPD receiving emails from Data Miner, even after they claim they unsubscribed, basically proves fucking nothing.
Well, Data Miner is having a security review issue now. So I think what happened here is that LA Taco, which is sort of like, it's like the new alternative weekly, like after the LA Weekly or LAist and all that. So what's happening here is you have somebody in the intel world likely leaking this to LA Taco to sort of like take the LAPD down a peg. That's kind of what's going on here. So Data Miner has a lot of like weird capital in it, and not like trusted capital when it comes to like security investing. And so there's there's going to be a lot of pressure against Data Miner going forward.
They just want to talk about it.
It's spicy. Some spicy stories coming out of LA Taco. Some real hot sauce. Oh, man. So the next one is from Todd McLeese, who sends in this one. The real reason everyone's quitting their jobs right now, in the midst of the Great Resignation, research has shown that people tend to quit their jobs after experiencing a turnover shock, a life event that precipitates self-reflection about one's job satisfaction. Yep. common sense tells us that. The next one is from,
Or maybe, I mean, wages have not risen to keep pace, with productivity, and maybe people are just feeling like, I don't know, maybe I should get a raise, and that's why we have all this unemployment right now.
Yep.
Or maybe those jobs just suck. Has anyone ever has that occurred to anyone? Like, whatever happened to just there being shitty jobs that nobody wants to do, and then we just don't do them, or we find a robot to do them for us, or an illegal alien. Like, that's basically the American way, is it not?
And they're making so much money on Bitcoin. Why go back to work? So the next one is from Bob Angel, and it says, the headline says iPhone 14. With the iPhone 13 now officially announced for September 14th, next Tuesday. People now are obviously already turning their why wait until September 14th for the actual iPhone 13 to come out to start talking about iPhone 14. And that's when this headline from Apple Insiders about the iPhone 14 will release in 2020, probably on the first or second Tuesday of September at 10 a.m. Pacific, as they always do historically. And it may have a punch hole camera with no notch at the top anymore, and no ports, meaning no lightning port at the bottom, and Touch ID in the display, according to Apple Insider. So we already got the rumor mongering mill rolling on iPhone 14, even before iPhone 13.
I'm shocked that there's an iPhone 13. I mean, I think it should have just skipped to 14. I mean, isn't that how they do it in those
they
old
skipped
hotels?
they skipped iPhone 9. They went right from 8 to 10.
If you know anything about the cultures, right, it's funny that it works this way because 13's unlucky for Americans and 14's unlucky for Asians. So it works out. They'll get both of
Yeah,
us.
they should just go straight to like the
88.
iPhone
That would
1000
be
or
the big
something,
one in China.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, 88.
So the next one's from Evan from Daily Mail UK, that American Airlines pilots plan to picket airports in protest over work conditions, claiming they have been left too tired to fly safely. The Allied Pilots Association will picket at Miami International Airport, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, which that's America's biggest airport, that in Chicago O'Hare. Americans based out of O'Hare. But Dallas-Fort Worth is a massive fucking airport, by the way, one of the world's largest. So those are two massive airports, and those are two major hubs for American flights. So that's a big deal. Well, American Airlines is probably America's biggest still, or United or American, one of the two. So for American airline pilots to be picketing at Dallas-Fort Worth, get ready for a whole lot of shit going down with flight delays if that happens. The next one from Evan via the Daily Mail. China's celebrities warned they must oppose decadent money worship. The meeting between the Communist Party officials and show business chiefs in Beijing on Tuesday ran with the slogan, "Love the party, love the country, and advocate morality and art." Obviously, it's a translation from Mandarin, which doesn't flow quite so nicely in English. But entertainers were told they must conform to social ethics and personal morality. Comes amid broader crackdown on scandal-hit celebrities and wealthy elite. China's celebrities have been warned they must oppose the decadent ideas of money worship, hedonism, and extreme individualism at the entertainment industry symposium held by the Communist Party.
What is the point? What is the point of being a celebrity if you can't do
to
those
promote
things?
the party? That's the point.
Well, I mean, that just sucks. Like, who would want to be a celebrity?
The meeting in Beijing on Tuesday ran with the slogan, "Love the party, love the country, advocate morality and art." It was attended by senior party officials and show business bosses who were told they must conform to social ethics, personal morality, and family values. Beijing has been cracking down on celebrities as part of a broader attack on China's wealthy elite, while some have linked to Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, a purge of political opponents in the 1960s. And movie star Zhao Wei was wiped from the internet And China sees celebrity culture as the pursuit of wealth as a dangerous Western import, which threatens communism because it promotes individualism rather than collectivism. President Xi Jinping has also rolled out a raft of social changes, including banning children from playing video games, barring private tutoring, and investing in more affordable housing. Attendees on Tuesday's conference were told they must consciously abandon vulgar and quiche inferior tastes and consciously oppose the decadent ideas of money worship, hedonism, and extreme individualism. Actress Zhang spoke to the guests to pledge her support to the party's cause because she doesn't want to go work with the Uyghurs. As a Chinese in the new era, a Chinese actor, and a Chinese literary and art worker, it is very necessary to understand one's own direction, determine the meaning of one's responsibilities, manage well one's words and deeds, and improve one's personal morality, she said. It's our creator's duty to do every work simply and unadoredly, and to pass positive energy silently to the audience. In recent weeks, the authorities have banned reality shows, purged K-pop megastars from social media, and ordered broadcasters not to pander to tastes of sissy men. A list of misbehaving celebrities who have allegedly been blacklisted by Beijing was circulated on social media last week. And it comes after Jack Ma, the billionaire owner of Alibaba, disappeared for 3 months and had his firms restructured. In addition to Alibaba, Didi was pulled from app stores. The tech sector accounts for almost a third of China's economy, but the government crackdown on big tech has wiped an estimated $1.2 trillion from the market. The dramatic shift by Beijing, prepared even to wipe billions of its own economy, has raised fears of a new cultural revolution. A decade of political turmoil from 1966 to 76 under Chairman Mao, the tyrant launched a vicious campaign to cement his rule, purging any capitalist or bourgeoisie elements from within the party's schools, factories, and government institutions. It's not clear exactly how many people were killed during the purge, with estimates ranging from 400,000 to as many as 20 million. In addition to its crackdown on the tech world and celebrities, Beijing has banned private tutoring. On Wednesday, the government pledged to stabilize housing prices and make homes affordable to young people. These policies are part of Xi's goal of common prosperity, through which a more socialist country can be achieved. So no more flaunting and flexing your wealth as a celebrity, because we're trying to not upset the peasants. And you're pissing.
Wait, affordable housing in a major urban environment? Can I vote for this in America? Like, where's the? I mean, yeah, sissy man. I'm sorry, but like, you got to go. I need my cheaper housing.
Yeah, but I see what he's getting at is basically they're trying to make the celebrities not flaunt their wealth because it's you can piss off. I mean, the classics Marxism says exactly that, which is at some point you get too many people who don't have the wealth, and they watch too many people who become, the bourgeoisie class, and then they revolt. That's the whole premise of Marxism. Is you get too many people on the low end of the ladder, and they will have a revolution. That's it, in a nutshell. And so if you are the haves, don't be showing you have to the have-nots, and that's what is the very clear signal here. Stop flaunting your wealth in as a celebrity.
And
I
not
think it's
follow the Western culture. I mean, Iranians. I can tell you this on the Iranians. I mean, you'll have multi-gazillionaires literally walking around with torn outfits just to make sure that no one thinks that they have any money.
Interesting how it can tie to the tech billionaires as well. All the tech, we had one yesterday. JD.com, one of China's most wealthy individuals, just resigned yesterday. And so maybe now we have some insight as to why the billionaire tech, and these individuals are worth north of 20, 30, 40 billion, and they're all resigning. Maybe it's a related issue where the state is saying, hey, we have to stop glamorizing, the Jack Ma celebrity billionaire culture because it's pissing off the peasants, and we're worried about a potential revolution. which
Not only that, Tyler, I think also possibly there's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of depression that's going on in so many countries, and because the more that everyone's getting, gathering and through social media and television, the more you see the complete difference between the haves and the have-nots, let's say, then there's a lot of depression of people thinking that, what, this is the life I don't have. This is, and they're kind of looking inwards to themselves. Maybe, possibly, it's also, having people, more and more people turning towards fraud or towards corruption or whatever in order to get that. So, I mean, there is some kind of a cultural impact that is also happening to the people, and especially to the younger people that keep seeing, comparing themselves and seeing what they don't have, and which can also create a massive problem with depression and suicide rates and so forth.
okay. So the next one.
Therefore, it's the impression that is created on social media may not be true, because I think majority of the celebrities, I don't think they are that well off. They just appear to be doing well, but there's only a handful of them who has really made it and has a lot of money. For example, Zhao Wei, I don't think she made a lot of money from her celebrity life. It's more her business that is making her a lot of money. So I think we have to be careful about what you see on social media. People may just want to appear to look very, have a fancy life, etc., etc. But sometimes they really have nothing. They just want to let people think that they have it. But we just have to, yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with Neda. It's a mental thing. Why do you need to, resign yourself to all this marketing or those PR that people put in front of you? Just be balanced.
Common prosperity. We got to make sure everyone feels like they're not left out.
U.S. In the U.S., when you're a billionaire, you create a foundation, and the foundation is what the U.S. government takes from you when they want to do things like run intelligence operations through the Ford Foundation, say, or if you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and you get caught hanging out with a pedophile spy, then what they do is they take your foundation from you and then use that foundation for their own purposes. But in China, they're not that sophisticated. They haven't figured out how to do
So
that yet.
they figured out something, because the next headline from the Wall Street Journal says how. And by the way, clearly Uncle Xi over there in China is very concerned about how Chinese citizens are what they're being exposed to, and how the big tech celebrities, or more notably these film stars, are giving them a diet of that is like an opiate of the mind, as they say. So this new article from the Wall Street Journal that Cheryl just shared, the headline reads, "How TikTok serves up sex and drug videos to minors in the U.S." And it's got 5 journalists on this one, so it's quite a big article. And it says, after signing up for an account on TikTok, a 13-year-old user started by searching the app for OnlyFans, the name of a site known for hosting adult entertainment, then watched a handful of videos in the results, including 2 selling pornography. Then the user turned to the app's personalized For You feed, where TikTok delivered a string of popular videos that many users see. But the app didn't forget the young user's interest in sex, quickly serving up more, including dozens of role-playing videos where people pretended to be in relationships with caregivers. In one, a man's voice gives instructions to a young woman in a latex leotard, and as the user scrolled through the videos appearing in the feed, lingering on the more sexually oriented ones while moving more quickly past others, the For You feed was soon almost entirely dominated by TikToks involving sexual power dynamics and violence. The app's algorithm had pushed the user into a rabbit hole that many users call kink talk, featuring whips, chains, and torture devices. Some of the content is banned by the platform. The account was one of dozens of automated accounts or bots created by the Wall Street Journal to understand what TikTok shows young users. These bots, registered as users aged 13 to 15, were turned loose to browse TikTok's For You feed, which is their algorithmic feed, the highly personalized, never-ending feed curated by the algorithm. An analysis of the videos served to these accounts found that through this powerful algorithms, TikTok can quickly drive minors, among the biggest users of the app, into endless spools of content about sex and drugs. TikTok served one account registered as a 13-year-old at least 569 videos about drug abuse, references to cocaine and meth addiction, and promotional videos for online sales of drug products and paraphernalia. Hundreds of similar videos appeared in the feeds of the journal. Other major accounts. TikTok also showed the journal's teenage users more than 100 videos from accounts recommending paid pornography sites and sex shops. Thousands of others were from creators who labeled their content for adults only. Still others encouraged eating disorders and glorified alcohol, including depictions of drinking and driving and of drinking games. The journal shared with TikTok a sample of 974 videos about drugs, pornography, and other adult content that were served to the minor accounts, including hundreds shown to single accounts in quick succession. Of those, 169 were removed from the platform before the journal shared them, whether by their creators or TikTok couldn't be determined. Another 255 were removed after being shared with the company, among them more than a dozen portraying adults as caregivers entering relationships with people pretending to be children called littles. The woman in the role-playing video said she wished TikTok did a better job of keeping adult content out of minors' feeds. I do have in my bio that it is 18 plus, but I have no real way to police this, she wrote in a message. I do not agree with TikTok showing my content to someone so young. A spokeswoman declined to address the content of the individual videos, but said the majority didn't violate guidelines. She said TikTok removed some of the videos after the journal's account viewed them and restricted the distribution of other videos to stop the app from recommending them to other users, but declined to say how many. The spokeswoman said the app doesn't differentiate between videos it serves to adults and minors, but said that the platform is looking to create a tool that filters content for young users. TikTok's terms of service say that users must be 13 years old and that users under 18 need consent from their parents. Protecting minors, and here's the quote, protecting minors is vitally important, and TikTok has taken industry first steps to promote a safe and age-appropriate experience for teens, the spokeswoman said in the statement. She noted that the app allows parents to manage screen time and privacy settings for their children's accounts while talking out of her ass. So, yeah, they don't give a shit if you're, as long as you.
You know, Tyler, I'm beginning to think China doesn't like us. You know, I don't know. It just
Do you
seems like
like
they're kind
China,
of.
Charles?
Well, I
Feeling
never
is
decided
mutual.
that I was going to target their children with like porn and, like I didn't try and sell them fake vaccines or like tainted dog food.
But you're,
You know,
hang on, Charles,
can't we
but
all
you
just get
did
along?
say you do have roots to a Scotch Irish background. So your forefathers probably did sell opium 10 generations ago to the Chinese.
No, 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 no. My ancestors, I do. Although I did win a scholarship to prep school that was founded by an opioid magnate. That is true. I will admit that. That is a thing that happens. But I will say that my ancestors did the honorable thing, which was conquering the west of the United States, where there were absolutely no Native Americans whatsoever there. They all played, kumbaya, and they watched Pocahontas, and they hung out together, and there were no problems. Everything was cool. But no, I don't know about this whole opioid addiction thing. I mean, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But I don't think stuff that was done in the 1870s. Like, surely there must be some statute of limitations here. Like, do we really need to keep allowing fentanyl into our cities? Like, is that really a thing? I don't know.
So
Something to
the
think
next
about.
one from Ken from MSN.com. A guy tried to pull a fast one by claiming a Tesla backed into him, but that didn't work out because this dipshit doesn't realize that Teslas have cameras all around them. And yet another Tesla victim trying to blame a Tesla, not knowing Teslas have 360-degree cameras. So you can't try and pull a fast one on a Tesla. So try that with a different car next time. The next one's from Evan, that Biden's total financial surveillance is the headline. What if every one of your non-cash financial transactions was automatically reported to a beefed-up, audit-hungry IRS? Is the question. And I just tweeted that out. Imagine living in a world where every one of your non-cash financial transactions, a restaurant meal, a Venmo transfer to a friend, maybe some Bitcoin bought on the dips, was automatically reported to a beefed up, audit hungry IRS. That dystopia will become a reality if President Joe Biden gets his way. Biden, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and key Capitol Hill allies such as Senator Elizabeth Warren are pushing a vast intrusive financial surveillance system in the name of closing the tax gap. But don't worry, there's no need to fear if you've got nothing to hide. For already compliant taxpayers, the only effect of this regime is to provide easy access to summary information on financial accounts and to decrease the likelihood of costly no-fault examinations. The Treasury Department said this May in a negatively authoritarian document called the American Families Plan Tax Compliance Agenda. But for non-compliant taxpayers, the department continues, this regime would encourage voluntary compliance as evaders realize that the risk of evasion being detected has risen noticeably. So yes, the IRS is starting to use data. There's this thing called data, and governments have figured out that it's valuable, including their agencies like the IRS. Headline, breaking news. Governments have learned about data. Government agencies like the IRS have figured out there's this thing called data, and they're using it.
So my girlfriend is the head of the IRS, and she is so interested in blockchain, but not Bitcoin, blockchain, because everyone's transactions can be monitored. Very interesting. I don't think Biden, whether Biden has a position on it or not matters. I think if the IRS wants it, it will happen.
I mean, in Taiwan, they have this already. I mean, they kind of play a game where they have you file your receipts and stuff, but they already know. And I think you mentioned in Sweden they already know.
Yeah, Sweden knows, and not only does the tax authority know, known as Skatteverket, every citizen knows what every other citizen has. So it's a very transparent system over there in Sweden. So the next one is from Evan from CNN. They will about robots that will even sing you happy birthday are picking up unwanted jobs at a Latin restaurant in Texas. And I think they mean a Mexican restaurant. I've never been to a Latin restaurant in Texas. Restaurants across the country are struggling to find employees, so one establishment in Dallas decided to hire robots to pick up the slack. It was a no-brainer, said Espertaco Borga, the owner. Hey, CNN, you got to stop it with those autoplay ads in your articles. So it was a no-brainer, said Espertaco Borga, the owner of Laduni since 2001, who told CNN he's never seen the industry in such a dire situation. After COVID-19 pandemic and a major ice storm in the area, the Latin restaurant wondered how it would stay afloat. But little by little, customers started coming back. In the dining room, all of a sudden, it gets completely full, and our takeout and delivery remain the same. The only part that didn't come back were the employees, Borges said. He struggled to find busboys and other employees to fill the positions. All of a sudden, we had 50 to 100% more business than we did even prior to COVID, with a third of the staff. So everybody was getting overwhelmed, overworked, and frustrated, both customers and staff, he said. So Borga decided to contact American Robotech, a robotics company based in Plano, Texas, to see if it offered solutions. The very next day they showed up, they mapped out the restaurant, they assigned the tables numbers within 45 minutes, Borga said, and after a day, the girl at the expo line was in love with this because her arm didn't hurt after carrying 60 trays a day. The robots cost about $15 a day each, Borges said, and the cost savings helped him pay his employees better for working less. He said the robots weren't taking anybody's job because he can't find people to fill those positions anyways. No one wants to work in hospitality right now, he said. The robots help greet customers, take food to tables, and will even sing happy birthday.
Oh, that's nice. They finally figured out how Japan solved the problem.
Texas is catching up to Japan in the 80s.
Huh, what does Japan have that Texas doesn't have?
Old people.
Let me think. Could it be that Texas
doesn't have tight border control, and that Japan does have tight border control? Could it be that the Japanese economy and the Japanese equivalent of the IRS subsidizes hiring robots for jobs instead of illegal aliens, whereas our system is sort of the reverse? I mean, there are all these things that we could learn from Japan, but of course, to do that is racist because, America first.
So the next one from Anjini in the audience, who sends in this one from the Hindustan Times, that China announces $31 million of aid for the Taliban. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi announced the donation in a meeting held by video link with counterparts and senior diplomats from Pakistan, Iran, and Tajikistan. A little weekend, spending money to keep the country from collapse. The next one, also from Engini, from CNN. The Matrix 4 posts first footage to an interactive fan site about red pills and blue pills. All the geeks and Elon Musk are waiting for the Matrix 4, and now you can go to the fan site and watch the separate videos that they have for the upcoming Matrix 4. And then someone in the audience with the Twitter account New Realm Media sends in this one from Business Insider that they say they have an exclusive that Amazon has ambitious plans to bring in-person medical care to 20 more cities. Amazon Care is expanding around the country with plans to offer in-person care in cities like New York, Atlanta, Denver, Miami next year, and partner so that you can choose Amazon as your medical service provider if you have medical insurance. Amazon's going big into medical for that sweet, sweet, juicy, juicy data that they're going to get from your smart toilet.
I wonder if they'll collect people's genetics.
There was a really interesting tweet thread by Alex Rampel, who's at Andreessen Horowitz and at Affirm, about buy now, pay later. So if you want to know everything about why is buy now, pay later an early threat to trillions of dollars of market cap for Visa and MasterCard, Visa's $500 billion, MasterCard's $350 billion of card issuing banks, and he breaks it all down about why is buy now, pay later such a financial phenomena, and a gun at the head of Visa and MasterCard and the trillions of dollars of the credit card companies. And he says it's because behind every card transaction with Visa and MasterCard, there are 5 parties: the consumer, the issuing bank, the network, the acquiring bank, and the merchant. And the middle 3 get zero data on the SKUs, the actual items that are being bought. But buy now, pay later makes no sense for a $5 transaction at Walgreens. But do you want to get a 2-meter long paper receipt, which you need to return that $5 item? Because of the architecture, there's no way for the issuer to receive and the merchant doesn't want to give it to them. Because the issuer, network, and merchant acquirer do not see the SKU level detail, financing is just cash advance and everything else. What if a merchant wants to lower the rate for some items to sell more? What if the manufacturer wants to lower it across merchants? They can't do that currently with credit card system. That is what makes buy now, pay later so interesting. It's a parallel network with the SKU level information that bypasses the issuing bank, card network, and the merchant acquirer. It's just the consumer and the merchant. And this is the exciting part, a new participant, the product manufacturer. Let's say Samsung wants to create an installment payment plan for their new $1,000 phone because lowering the price will sell more stuff. How do you do this at, say, Walmart, Target, and Amazon when everyone has a different kind of credit card and those issuers don't see the actual SKU numbers? You can use buy now, pay later. And this is why buy now, pay later is going to eat the $1 trillion credit card company business, because it cuts out the middlemen. And the people that win are the consumer and the manufacturer and the merchant, and not the middleman. And that's why it's going to win. Unless regulators come in and save Visa and MasterCard from their inevitable fate.
There you go. Because think about it, right? Why do we have middlemen in credit card transactions and transactions generally? Because of that whole financial surveillance thing we just talked about with the IRS. Do you think Visa and MasterCard are going to be in on that? What do you think?
To be determined. To be determined. So we will leave you with that lingering thought here at the top of the hour, as we will meet again in just 5 short hours, and we'll do it all over again with a whole bunch of new headlines, as we always do. Thank you to everybody for